res, but we're really not, because we always change the subject 5 seconds before we
go. Yeah. I mean, if only our fans heard what we were talking about before every single stream, yeah, they'd be shocked. But
all the more reason for an after hours.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should have like a paywalled after hours. I mean, we were thinking about that, doing paywalled content.
Or at least, I still want to try the call-in show idea.
Yeah,
we talked about that for like a year. We need to give that a shot.
We could do it. We could do one on yours and one on mine, to spread the risk.
And watch that just turn into an absolute disaster.
Oh man. Speaking of disasters, I have to. Okay, so I wanted to start off, Prude.
Happy Dominion Day.
Exactly, Happy Dominion Day, or Canada Day. Well, I prefer Dominion Day. Obviously, it's Dominion Day. Don't get me started. If that puts me on a watch list, I don't care. It's Dominion Day. Okay, my father, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, my very early relatives that came here before World War I. They all said it was Dominion Day. It's Dominion Day. I don't care what anybody says. So what I wanted to do, Prude, is I think even though this is Canadian news, because I figure we started the show with a little bit of Canadiana.
Okay.
It's going to make my blood boil. I'm just going to try to contain myself. But I think you would find this fascinating as well. But let's get, let's let some of the fans pour in. So this is Digital Archipelago 127. Art in the Absence of Pity. And we are going to read the very controversial but very groundbreaking essay in the book Art and Fear by Paul Virilio called A Pitiless Art, which I believe is actually proved when I was rereading it this morning. It's actually kind of relevant considering the recent Peter Thiel interview with Ross Douthat. I thought that was quite interesting. And I think that maybe Virilio, he really predicted certain trends, but I think he may have, he wrote this in 2000. So he may have like sort of maybe over exaggerated certain things, because I think he didn't predict the sort of we'll get into it. So before we get into that, Prude, how have you been?
I'm all right. I can't complain. I have done my customary buy fireworks for the 4th of July and get ready to plan out some ridiculous things with the family in terms of explosives. But other than that, things that, could put me on a watch list if that gets clipped out of context. But no, I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
I didn't get to buy any fireworks because I knew I was going to be working tonight. And I remember when I was a kid, I was always very envious of Americans because there's all sorts of restrictions here. Like I remember I was obsessed with wanting to buy M80s. And not to say too much, but not to say I have never personally bought illegal fireworks. But I know for a fact that on certain reservations, there's, let's say there's more Americana than Canadiana when it comes to firework regulations. So, not that I've ever bought, stuff of that nature. But, yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I used to love it, man. Like I was, I guess every kid loves fireworks. But, yeah, this year, I don't know, it's
every man likes blowing shit up. It doesn't matter how old you get.
Yeah, exactly. That was like that was like what was that line in The Simpsons with the Sikh clerk when they went on that beach vacation? Celebrating the birth of America by blowing up a tiny piece of it. That was pretty funny. But just for Dominion Day, I saw this headline and I had to share it because, I have to. There are a lot of good people. There's this guy on YouTube, or I think he's on YouTube. He's mostly on Twitter, but he doesn't follow me. But he's friends with Fortisak's. What's his name? Daniel Tyre or Trier?
That name sounds familiar.
He had this video because there was this question, I believe, by what was a Darcy Media. What is a Canadian? And he had a 2-minute video that I encourage everyone going and watching it, of course, after this show. Oh God, don't remind me, Jorge, about the Kincaid posting. We'll get to the Kincaid posting by what was it, the official White House account, or was it the official ICE account on Twitter that was Kincaid posting for 4th of July? But I saw this, and it's very hard not to blackpill, but I know that Fortisax has a good thesis that delivers some much needed white pills about the future of Canada. But so keep in mind that this guy was one of Trudeau's top capos, and he is a hideous ghoul. And I don't care if whatever I'm criticizing him, because I believe it's my right to disagree with these people. So this came just today, and it's from CPC News. Here we go. This is Gillibrand, Stephen Gilbert. There's no one way to be a Canadian. Our cultural minister, Minister of Heritage and Culture, Stephen Gilbert, or Gilbeau, Federal Minister of Identity and Culture. This is our federal. This guy was Trudeau's top capo.
I'm more blown away by the fact that there is a federal minister for identity and culture.
Yeah.
I guess because you and I have such a different word for or understanding of identity, that it's kind of strange to think, like, is that a relatively new office in the federal government, or is that like an older institution?
It's an older institution, I believe.
So I imagine that if we were to go back like 100 years and read about, the Ministry for Identity and Culture, it'd be probably incredibly based.
Yeah.
Is that the vibe I'm getting?
Oh,
here?
Actually, it is quite new. It's from 1996.
Okay, so
yeah.
Who was Prime Minister in 1996?
Chrétien?
Okay.
I think so, yeah, Chrétien. So this is he was, I believe, one of Trudeau's czars back during the coup, and now he's the Minister of Identity and Culture, and this guy also was pushing for the online harms bill. Guilbeault took to a new ministry which replaced the old heritage, and of course he has to, Donald J. Trump lives rent-free in the heads of all these people, which replaced the old heritage ministry and took up responsibility for Parks Canada as U.S. President Donald Trump.
Heritage ministry, okay.
Yeah. Was ramping up rumorous trade wars, talking about annexing his country and neighboring to north. An interview with the Canadian press said most Canadians probably hadn't reflected much on their own national identity before Washington changed its tone. I wonder why. Maybe that was the conscious plan. That was the conscious plan. That Canadians don't really think about their identity or what that meaning of the word a Canadian really is. The reaction 10 years after Guilbeault's old boss, Justin Trudeau, described Canada as post-national state, has been surge in national pride in the culminating today in Canada Day celebrations. Dominion Day. What we're seeing is a renewed sense of pride in being Canadian, told the Canadian press. This year it would take on a whole new role. Said that he sees his role as a departure from former heritage portfolio, which in its very definition implies that you're kind of looking backwards. To have a heritage minister means you're looking backwards. And here's the ultimate kicker, Prude. Here's the ultimate kicker. He said his task is not to work out what Canadian arts, identity, and culture might look like in the coming years, not to attempt to pin down anything like a singular Canadian identity. Isn't that your job, though? Oh, but I'm sorry, it's not your job. Propaganda is his job. Transnational progressivism is his job. I won't stand here and pretend that I can tell you what Canadian identity is or should be.
When you're supposed to be an expert, but you can't do that without getting in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. My role in the coming months will be to work with people across the country to help perhaps define and better promote our identity, maybe rejuvenate a sense of unity. It would be pretty rich for one member of a cabinet sitting in Ottawa to tell all of Canada, this is what Canadian identity should look like. That's not how I roll. Well, of course. I mean, it's just, this is so ridiculous. The people can rally around a complex task in a country as big and diverse as this one. There's one language in the United States. Oh, see again, Trump always lives rent-free in these people's heads. There's one language in the United States. There's only one culture. In the process, he said he hopes to encourage Canadians to see themselves in each other. But how are you going to do that if there's nothing to see in each other? If there's no definition by what you can see in the other as a Canadian, what's the point? I've always been fascinated, for example, by similar Quebecois in Alberta. Are they really that similar? Are you kidding me? Like, he said in French, there are two people who are very proud, very autonomous, very independent in the philosophic sense of the term. He said that these ties of culture and history are important to keep in mind as Canadians stare down American threats to Canadian identity, sovereignty, and economy. There are a lot of things that bring us together, and this is true for the whole country, and that's what I'm going to work on over the next few weeks and months. Report by Canadian Press. So this is essentially like the thesis. I think it was either Morgoth or Barack Obama that said that every other Anglosphere country, every other Anglosphere nation will essentially double down as soon as Trump is elected again.
Yeah, it was Morgoth's woke North Korea thesis.
Yeah, the woke North Korea thesis. Exactly, record deepness. You can't threaten what you don't have. Exactly. But you know what's funny is that really driving home this lack of Canadian identity, I mean, that just strengthens Donald Trump's argument, unironically. Because you could say that, there's no such thing as Canada, so they're kind of like Americans, so they might as well just be Americans. So instead of going the reverse and saying that there is a quality to what a Canadian is, there is a shared history and heritage and identity. There are works of art that have been produced by Canadians that have a distinct flavor. There are cultural sort of shelling points that go beyond just, Trailer Park Boys and Hockey Night in Canada. Not to say the Hockey Night in Canada Trailer Park Boys are bad, but I'm just saying, So instead of saying that there is something that could potentially be a bulwark that can galvanize Canadians against this potential threat of Trump, although I maintain, I don't think Trump's serious. I mean, it's a fantasy that Donald Trump.
And it's also really just used primarily as a method to focus on trade negotiations. Like, he kind of stopped talking about it for a while, and then he brought it back after, I guess, the latest round of talks or whatever. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm not really holding my breath that anything like that's ever going to happen.
Well, even on news radio, I remember listening to News Talk 1010, which is local to here in Ontario. I believe it out of Toronto. I think it was either Jerry Agar or Ben Mulrooney, the kid of Brian Mulrooney, that said that, if Trump is serious, that would be like him trying to put his face on Mount Rushmore, because he would be able to double the size, like literally overly double the size of America if he were to annex Canada. But it's never going to happen. It's a total fantasy. I mean, let's be real. But the point being is that instead of finding a way to sort of double down, you're just giving Trump that argument by saying, you know what, there's no such thing as a Canadian. Our Minister of Identity and Culture cannot tell you what a Canadian is. And this was Trudeau's boy for so many years.
I think the other thing too, Gio, not to miss the forest for the trees on this one, is why is he saying that? It's not necessarily, I mean, Washington's the cover, but I mean, considering the demographics of Canada, like what is the I can't really explain what Canada is.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Because then you would have to give a very exclusionary model to the millions of people who live in the cities, Brampton, etc., that definitely are not Canadian by any stretch of the imagination. But that's an exclusionary understanding of what it means to be Canadian. But Washington gives you the perfect shit lib, white adversary you need without necessarily talking about, the fact that underqualified, non-English or French-speaking truck drivers can kill people in my country and yours with no real legal consequence.
Yeah. It's sort of like Russia to the Europeans. It's like it's an easy way to, ignore their own a lot of domestic problems in the ruling class. By the way, apparently Trump is going to cut off certain arms sales to Ukraine.
I saw that from Politico, and the main argument is that the American government can't afford to give any more because it can't make enough to replace them.
Yeah. But then Russia ran out of missiles 3 years ago, so I don't know, man.
Well, as it's known, America cannot really build things like it used to, which is both unfortunate, and that's sort of the animus.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Administration, but like it's the same sort of stuff that Politico and other reports have come in, even with regards to the conflict in against Iran or in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Like the plain simple fact is that like we don't have enough of this stuff to give away like we used to. We just don't make.
Yeah, exactly. No, but also like recently, I know that Trump secured a lot of deals with NATO spending. I think you said this last week, or actually it was A. Templar that said, which I'll release the episode tomorrow. It's just I've been busy. He said, basically it's a very like low cost strategy for Trump to address that problem of armaments. Just make Europeans pay for it, or make other people pay for their own defense, and maybe ramp up production in some ways. Because, for example, Mark Carney even pledged to spend more or meet their NATO target. Which, I mean, if we lived in a sane world, if this was, say, for example, the Canada that I grew up in, maybe that would make sense.
Well, as I understand it, the NATO spending goal that Trump has been pushing, which I think had been discussed even by his predecessor, Barack Obama, was just that it's supposed to be 2.5% defense spending, 2.5% of national GDP.
Yeah.
Can that be accomplished? I don't know.
No, we don't know.
There's some writers and everything from foreign affairs to more conservative analysts that are like, yeah, this is probably not going to happen. So only time will tell. I'm not particularly optimistic, but I mean, it is an issue that Trump has been pressing for quite some time, just because it's the basic thesis of of just buck passing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we spend too much. We can't do this forever, and America's not in a position to be building everything like we used to. Ergo, you need to spend more so we can focus back on at home, which is, a fair argument. And of course, in this day and age, even something as reasonable as, hey, you guys need to pony up a little more is seen as insanity because of threats, etc. Why not keep America involved? So it's not in the best position for any party right now.
No, but that's what I was going to. Yeah, I think, I mean, my controversial take in the Canadian situation is that this is actually a bad move. And no, it's not because I'm like a Russia shill or whatever. But first of all, I don't think that Russia poses a serious threat to Canadian sovereignty. I mean, maybe you could argue the Arctic Passage or way up north, but I mean, the Russians are pretty much busy with themselves at the moment, right? But the way I would argue that this is a bad thing is that I think historically, I mean, even Forsyth said this, Canada had maybe, I would say 20 to 30 years ago was the time for Canada to seriously rebuild its military after Diefenbaker and then Trudeau the senior basically destroyed the Canadian military, which was one of the most well-developed militaries in the world after World War II. But I think that maybe 20 years ago, maybe under Harper, that would have made sense. Whereas now that the Liberals have consistently for 10 years essentially gutted the Canadian economy and put all sorts of pressure on average Canadians because of mass immigration, I think that rebuilding the military at this current time, because of NATO spending, because of some spectacle in Eastern Europe or whatever. Let's say it's some spectacle. What I mean is that the sort of impetus for European elites guided by Washington to treat this like fantastical post-World War II narrative that the Kremlin's going to take over all of Europe and Canada and America, like the Austrian painter tomorrow, is frankly ridiculous. The war is a real and tragic thing, but my point being is that the impetus for Carney giving to NATO defense spending, I think that they're, definitely for the future of Canada, a strong military is obviously needed. But currently, because of the severe economic and just demographic and cultural mismanagement of the Liberal Party for almost 10 years now, I think that there are way more pressing issues. Maybe Carney did it as a bargaining chip for Trump because Trump's threatening annexation or whatever, or threatening to not negotiate with the tariffs, but then Carney had to cave on some Digital Securities Act that was passing. So I think that it's very interesting. And a lot of European nations are also in a very similar boat in that, do they really have the funds to spend on defense? It's one of those things where the ship may have already sailed. And definitely it will benefit America because, if they could even just slightly relieve the pressure of the defense spending of essentially the Western world, I think that was Trump's goal, obviously. But I think the reasons for it are kind of dubious. And it's just, my problem is a lot of these countries, I shouldn't say these countries, I should say the elites of these countries have demonized their own military or have demonized involvement in the military for multiple generations now, such as in Germany being one of the most extreme cases. But now all of a sudden you're going to turn around and say that, well, we need well-managed, well-militarized societies. We need a martial society because of Russia or whatever, or the Chinese or whatever. So I just think that the plan itself is kind of like all those other bureaucratic spending obligations. It's sort of, it kind of reminds me of the Millennium Pledges, if you remember those, Prude. Did any of those really come to pass?
To some extent. But the thing is that even if you can't afford it, you still have to pay for defense. That's not
true.
That's not something that you can kind of just get yourself out of. That's not going to go away or anything like that. So important to consider in all of these sort of discussions is that, even if you don't like it, you're still going to have to deal with the obligation that all countries have to do, which is defense. All nations have it. I think some countries are a little more realistic, but it's also that Canada's a Five Eyes country. It has its own problems, sure, but at the same time, it still has to put up or shut up. Does that mean that we're going to get everything that we want with regards to, Canadian sovereignty or whatever? No, because I think for a lot of leaders right now, the push to do it is primarily motivated by what they see as a perceived threat from the Russians. And then on top of that, you have essentially a via negativa understanding of your own nation or identity, which has basically been what Canada has been reduced to under Trudeau. And even prior to that, that was always the running joke was that, post 90s Canada has always just been this great anti-American. We're just, we're friendlier. We're not armed. We have socialized medicine. And that may be just the American cultural affectation. But I know a lot of Canadians in my personal life that are just kind of defined themselves that way by default. And it's only really conservative or right-wing Canadians that are even willing to acknowledge that there is such thing as a Canadian identity or Canadian history. Yeah. No one talks about it outside of those that have read their George Grant or other, conservative social critics. So, it's tragic, but it's also in the same thing that what we're dealing with here in America. What is an American? You guys don't have a Stephen Miller kind of giving you an answer to that, which is, the most milquetoast kind of answer you can get, which is still conservative.
Right.
So, it's tragic because Canada has a rich history, both its Anglo and its French, background. But here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, obviously, you can't really, obviously you can't be really knee-jerk just because Mark Carney endorses something that it's automatically bad. For example, there was a lot of more like normie conservatives who were essentially like Maple MAGA types who were like bashing Carney, talking about the crown and how Canada is, you know, a combination of English and French and so forth, which really doesn't make any sense from any sort of like, you know, older definition of conservative. But I think that, you know, my criticism, rather than bashing Carney for talking about that, because like, you know, a lot of, I hate to say it, but a lot of like influencers in like Canadian conservative circles are essentially just like America Light.
Oh yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah. But the problem is that their criticism is unwarranted. But my criticism of Carney talking about Canada as a French and English nation is that he's just saying that. In other words, he is speaking as if he is governing from the right, when the actuality of what Carney is doing, kind of like Keir Starmer in the UK, is that he inevitably will be governing from the left, and he will essentially pull the wool over the eyes of people. And so that is, I think, more nuanced criticism than a lot of like Canadian influencers who are conservative wanting some like American Republican system where we don't recognize the crown, even though the British monarchy is an incredibly debased state and is largely symbolic, unless, you know, you're some kind of LaRoucheite or whatever. But, you know, nevertheless, I think that rhetorically it's a good move. Obviously, he really outflanked Poilievre. And but I think that the problem is that it was just a rhetorical tactic and nothing else.
Well, Starmer has done the same on immigration in Britain.
Oh, like, yeah, exactly.
He's not gonna. Yeah. He's gonna govern from the left on almost every issue, but as long as the rhetoric appears like you're flanking your milquetoast conservative counterparts, then like you're already doing the correct thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he would appoint somebody like this guy that says, I don't know what a Canadian is, just shows that the actual substance of it is, you know, yeah. I mean, what do you expect from people like Carney and Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
But moving on to more American news. So yeah, again, happy Dominion Day. And we just want to do the news for 20 minutes because this is a very complicated essay. So what's happening? The ceasefire was finally signed recently?
So Trump managed to negotiate and get Israel to commit to a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, and that Hamas would be relayed the terms from Egyptian and I think it was Lebanese sources or partners. So we'll see. I mean, I'm very skeptical of that coming to pass, just because, come on, this conflict's not going to really end. I don't think. Well, it will end, but what I mean by that is that I think that it's very clear to all of us that I think Israel would like it to end, but preferably on their terms, and they're not very happy with how this administration specifically, who has been far more heavy-handed than Biden was at the start of the conflict, has been handling it. Whether it's the targeted strikes on Iran and watching, like, reading tweets in Hebrew, like it seems like a lot of guys are really pissed in terms of like the Israel, political scene. So I mean that's what I saw got negotiated, and it also looks like Trump's probably going to get his bill passed. I think it escaped parts of committee in the Senate. Now it just needs to get hammered out and finalized. And it looks like they're going to get a lot of the things that they were still worried about, that we were concerned about happening on Twitter. So apparently it does look like that illegals are going to get or lose Medicaid.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, great. In the same way that I think finally a lot of American USAID operations have finally come to a close, which is also good news. But there's still so much that's going on that we're not going to get probably everything. And again, there's this non-interventionist position, which I'm very sympathetic to as someone who really doesn't like the idea of going to spend more money on a lot of the sort of military adventurism. But also at the same time, like the nation is in such existential states that I can't in good conscience really be as concerned financially about the state of the country as I probably should be. And even now, this has been the bill has once again been the cause of Elon Musk having his temper tantrum on Twitter.
Well, his penultimate said he was debating Nick Land.
He was. He replied to Nick Land, and in fact, that was the impetus of Oren bringing me back on his show tomorrow, was to talk about that. It's just like, yeah, there's some stuff from Xena Systems that you should probably be reading there, buddy. Like, you know, you want to actually like defeat the system or whatever, then maybe, just maybe, understand that like this moral high ground that you're putting yourself on is the least effective way to make your case. He's just like, well, I want to be a spacefaring civilization. I want to get to Mars. And it's just like, Musk, do you think that you're still going to make it?
Yeah.
Like, that's my question. Like, you are kind of, you're getting older, and I guarantee you're on some kind of drugs. And if you were serious about it, don't you think you'd be like training and doing the whole Brian Johnson shit about like trying to be as fit as possible and everything else? I don't know. But like, nevertheless, like, you know, he is the one that's got a lot of government contracts, both with civilian and defense, because Starlink's usage in the war in Ukraine. So there's a lot there. It's just a mess that I don't think we're ever really going to get to the bottom of. I would love to know. And it is, but it's revealing, because he's just like, well, we're gonna vote on it, and it's just like, well, all the people that really support you, Elon, are not American. Like, what's that? Yeah. Like, oh, I want to make a new party. Well, all the people that are supporting this can't vote in the United States to begin with. Like, I'm sorry, like, your biggest guys on Twitter are all of Southeast Asian descent.
I think, Ian Miles Chung is going to fly from Malaysia to door-to-door campaigning in Gary, Indiana. We're going to send him to Gary, Indiana, to do door-to-door campaigning for Elon Musk's third party. So,
and he'll do some stuff on the side for Vivek. Why not?
We're going to send him to Dayton, Ohio.
We're going to send... Yeah, you're going to Ohio. Which, I've been to Ohio. I don't really hate it in the way that I guess everyone.
Yeah, I've been to Cleveland once or twice. Yeah,
like I've been to Akron, and I've been to other parts of Ohio. Like, I don't hate it in the way that I think it's been memed up to. But it's also, I guess, like, it's also just the consequence of, you know, it being economically destroyed. It is the Rust Belt.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, again, I've never seen a full episode of The Simpsons, but I know every joke that they make about places through cultural osmosis. Like, you know, their jokes about upstate New York. You know, it's like, a lot of people treat Ohio like that, just this like economically depressed area. Nothing good can come from it, so don't bother. People treat it in the same way people meme about like you're going to Brazil or whatever. So, you know, whatever. That's up to them. But for me, it's just like there's so much going on with regards to that bill. I really do hope that it is. And primarily it has been this focus on, well, it just increases the budget for ICE to like.
Yeah, but there's kids in cages, Prue. There's literal cages.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what,
immaterial.
Did you see that on Twitter? Yeah.
It's immaterial to me. And I know that there's the whole what are they calling it now? The Alcatraz, the alligator Alcatraz in Florida, and Ron DeSantis is finally being politically savvy again, where he's just like, look, we're gonna allow state agents to be deputized as ICE agents, so we can actually get stuff done, which I think is great. That's a good start. So it's progress. It's progress.
Yeah. No, but then there was people. There was didn't ICE share some AI images of alligators?
Yeah, and ice hats. Like I'm really not a fan.
Woman artist had an illustration with a gator eating an ice hat. That's stupid. But
none of this is great.
No, it's flop.
This AI imagery is like coming from official government. I kind of find it just a little gauche. I don't like it, but also at the same time, I get it. It feeds.
It's kind of funny. Let's be real.
It's funny. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It's fun, but I'm just like, ugh.
I wonder what Frog put that prompt in that works for the ICE Twitter page.
Yeah, I wonder what mutual of ours who's behind a locked account, you know, or whatever, decided to like, hey, let's go make that happen.
I remember I was mutuals with this one guy that was a Trump staffer, but then I think like the Travis Brown network doxed him. His account was like hamster something. Harmless hamster. So I remember like we were mutuals, and yeah, they doxed him, and I think they had to let him go. But this was like Trump's first term when they still like they like if this guy was employed like now, kind of like that Elon Musk kid, I think they would have
I think
fired
he
him.
finally left, is what I saw.
Oh yeah.
The Mr. Big Balls guy finally decided to retire or quit or whatever, which again, fine. Well, I don't know his actual. I know he got doxxed, but like I don't know. I just know that it was kind of fun for 5 minutes to see a guy with explicitly anti-Indian tweets managing to keep his job in the White House and have Musk defend him, with Musk being like this big proponent of H-1B visas. So it's good to have what you have, but I think he's left, and he's also a young guy. Like these guys have, I guess, a future. So good for them.
Christy Noem riding a giant alligator AI through the skyline like Game of Thrones, or like a Frank Frazetta illustration.
Yeah, but she will never be pretty enough to be a Frank Frazetta woman.
Oh my
Let's
God.
get that out of the way. She's not built like Frank Frazetta's women. That
maybe Bober could ride an alligator like Frank Frazetta.
Congress really is Hollywood for ugly people, and
or a young what's her face, the voyeur. I can't believe I forget her name, but she was the military. She was literally like the general's daughter.
Oh, Nancy Mace. Yeah, and she literally is the general's daughter, for those that remember that very political film from the late 90s with John Travolta. Like, if there was a woman that embodies, like, pick me, I'm traumatized, and the only way I know how to express it is through, like, very lewd sexual expression, it's her. It's awful.
I mean, maybe young Nancy Mace could be a Frazetta girl going through the sky.
She didn't
riding a tiger.
Bad when she was younger, but like even then I'm just like, I'm
she
done.
Was at West Point.
I'm done. No, she was at the
Oh, she wasn't at West Point?
No, I think she was at the, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, is it just like the VMI? Was it the Virginia Military Institute?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. But do you know anybody that graduated from West Point, Prude?
I know one guy who went to West Point, and he became an air cavalry officer.
Whoa!
Because he wanted to fly helicopters like his dad. But that's the only guy I know.
Yeah.
So, I need to do my homework on all this stuff because apparently I'm talking about it tomorrow with Oren. But like overall, it seems like Trump is finally getting what he wanted to begin with, so good for him. And also, like, it's only for me, it's like, well, immigration and border enforcement should be like $100 billion plus a year kind of industry, or at least what we fund it with. And apparently, we're only giving them like $45 billion, which apparently is like a $43 billion increase from what the Biden administration had left behind, which is absolutely fucking insane. So, I mean, that's a good start. And then you have all this alligator Alcatraz stuff that's being built, and it's just like, well, even if it's good stuff optically. The question now is going to be, can we stop posting AI edits about alligators and ice hats, and can we actually start deporting tens of millions of people? And hopefully with this bill, it'll get started.
Yes, Marcone. There's wait, how do I say it? Marconen, yeah, we always read super chats at the end.
Yeah,
Marconen, we read super chats. So
do not worry. Yeah, whatever you send, we will read.
Oh, someone finally sent me something on Buy Me a Coffee, which I have to look at. But and all me and Prude's links are down below. So Prude's Subscribe Star, my Patreon, and Substack, Prude Substack.
Yes, to my lovely people on Subscribestar, you guys paid my rent this month, so thank you.
Nice. There you go. Yeah. Let me tell you, art supplies ain't cheap nowadays, especially in Canada. So, but they ignore super chats till the well, no, because Big Ben, I figure like for the continuity of the show, especially when we're reading stuff, I think that
I think the only time we ever break that rule is if someone sends us a super chat with like literal breaking news.
Yeah, then we've done that before.
We've done that before, but as is tradition and has sort of become the YouTube best practices, we usually just wait until the end.
Well, it's because I noticed like shows that like they like have a buzzer, and it's like Stream Slop, it's like Twitch, where it's like you're trying to have a serious point, and it's like, you know, you have this like flood of fucking super chats. It's like, no, I mean, that'd be amazing to have like a flood of super chats, but it's just like, I mean, when you're trying to get a point out, and like, yeah, I feel like it's better to like it's better for the continuity of the show. It's better for like the respect to people that are super chatting us to give them a full answer than just like as an aside there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So,
do you have the article?
Yes. I actually have the book. So we didn't cover that much news. There's not that much news. Oh, I mean, I know people are freaking out about the whole like camp thing. Like they were making, which is funny because Virilio does that in this article. But people were making obvious comparisons to mid-century Germany. And it's completely ridiculous. And
well, even under the mythology of the war, it's just like, well, these guys aren't being executed; they're just going back home.
Yeah.
But even then, for them, that's still too much. That's
like that Hee Hee Silly comic. And
yeah, and stay out. We'll get them next time. Yeah, as they try and get inside of a certain camp.
Yeah. So no, but it shows like there was this reply. I think it was under a Sean McCarthy tweet about like these literal fascists are putting people in camps and this society is breaking down, man. I think they generally do. It's sort of like that Bob Vyland thing. They like generally do not view these people as they don't believe in the integrity of any country. Well, they actually do. They believe in the integrity of.
They don't believe in the integrity of a white nation. Is
exactly
what that is. It's not rocket science. It's just they're anti-white.
No, but they do believe in this sort of like internationalist solidarity. Workers of the world unite, or rather,
it's the kind of stuff
of the world
that
unite.
Certain what we would call racist progressive writers of the early 20th century would identify as like an actual existential threat. Like, you know, I hate to sound like such a early 20th, like I don't even mean to sound radical in this instance, but like that internationalist, so, you know, solidarity of like, we will be the international that destroys like global white supremacy. And it's just like, well, you're literally proving everything Lothrop Stoddard ever wrote about. And it's just like, because okay, like we're the international, we're here to destroy white supremacy, we're here to destroy capitalism, we're here to destroy imperialism, and it's just like, so this is a rising tide of color.
Well, I think that what's interesting though is that I forget which, I was reading a academic paper, or it may have been like a Mark Fisher write or whatever, maybe on Substack, saying that like because the goal of frustrating international capitalism could never be realized in our lifetime, therefore like it has to be these other externalities of attacking bourgeois society, which is heavily coded with European, you know, societies and Western civilization. So it's like because we can't destroy capitalism, and because capitalism will give us a little bit of rainbow, you know, rainbow capitalism is a thing. There is no, exactly, Salmon Fish, there's no alternative to neoliberalism. Therefore, we have to like do something else that appears revolutionary, but at the end of the day,
and at this point, it just means ethnic cleansing.
But again, it's like it can never like I mean, a lot of people, even papers we've read on the show, they really love intellectualizing it. But at the end of the day, it is basically just, you know, they admitted now it's revenge fantasy. It's like that Bob Vyland punk band did the best job ever to say like, you want your country back, haha, you can't have it. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like all academic from like, from
Wow,
like,
I can't believe he just said it.
Angela Davis to like France fan on all of it. It's like, right down to the most sloppiest of slop of Ta-Nehisi Coates and who's the Italian woman that's grifting off of it? You and Dimes read it.
Robin DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo. Like it's all of that stuff is irrelevant. Bob Vylan, the punk band, said what these people take whole like thousands upon thousands of words to say. Is it
Vylan or just Bob Villain?
Bob Villain. Okay, yeah.
I figured that's what it would
be. Like it takes some thousands of words in books. He just says it.
Yeah.
You want your country back? Haha, you can't have it. It's just, but Prude, I will say though, the people were going crazy because there's a certain faction, the right, that was siding with him. But I think, like, okay, I do agree. He was banned. His travel visa to a tour in the United States was revoked. Which, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, Prude. I do think that, like, there has been, like, a number of cases that I think the American officials have gone overboard. Like, recently there was a case where there was a Canadian firefighter who I believe he was American because he was a veteran. He was a U.S. Marine in Iraq. And they revoked his visa to go to this firefighters convention. He was from British Columbia, but he was going over into, I forget, Maine or wherever, I forget. But they revoked his thing, and I think there is cases to be made where the American government, they have overreacted in a lot of cases. I mean,
I'm not familiar with the details of that case to offer a comment on.
No, but I'm saying, like, I think the reason that they banned the lead singer of Bob Villain is for obvious reasons, because he criticized a certain military organization.
Yeah, no, that seems to be the reaction, and I saw that from a lot. I think it was even Ted Cruz that had tweeted it out that his visa should be taken away or travel should be banned because of his position on the IDF and Israel, and neither you and I are pro IDF.
England was way worse.
Yeah, what he said on England is way worse. And if I had it, and if I were in charge, I would have denied his visa for being anti-English or anti-white. But instead, we make these like extreme levels of prostration and cutouts for this reason. In this case, allegations and claims of anti-Semitism over the fact that this guy is like, oh, you want your country back? Well, you're not going to get it. And I'm just like, oh, so like this is because you hate whites, you hate the English, and you just associate like colonialism also alongside this this project that is known by many as just Israel. And it's just like, okay, that's fine. But heaven forbid you make this about Israel and not about the fact that this guy hates white Englishmen.
But apparently he's half white, though.
Doesn't matter. Like he's always going to identify with the non-white half.
Yeah, like, of course.
Like there is no social or political advantage of being seen as white. And like if we go on Black Twitter, like let's not kid ourselves. It's not like there is it's not like there's very pro light-skinned sentiments either.
I mean, it's very, the discourse about them is, but anyways, let's move on. So
like, I get it. Like I agree with you, Gio, that like sometimes it seems like a lot of our visa positions on this are really more oriented around, and on one hand, I could understand the argument being like, oh, well, it's because like you can't really just, and I think they can, which I think is the more irritating part. Like, I don't see why you can't just say, like, this is anti-American or anti-white. Like, you've already said it with regards to South Africa. The precedent is there. So why not just go out of your way and say, this is anti-white, and we'll be on our way, and you don't...
Yeah, but conservatives can't do that in America.
Of course conservatives can't do that. And also, conservatives are bought out. So, I mean, like, yeah, I get it. But it's frustrating. I agree with you.
But it's also frustrating, I think, to I think it was like, who was it, Jake Shields or whoever siding with him. It's like, I don't know. I think like you know, there's obviously a nuanced position that a lot of people don't really don't really goes unsaid in a lot of like Twitter faction wars. So anyways, it is what it is.
It's not like nuance is allowed on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's designed deliberately not to have it.
But Ted Cruz is literally DSP if he never had a stroke. Oh,
so true.
So true. Apparently DSP isn't doing too good recently.
Health-wise or by making money?
I think both. I mean, well, making money because he was like crying on stream or whatever. But anyways, that's
well, he's made how much money over the years?
Oh, millions.
I feel like, okay, if that's the case, then you should be, hopefully you saved or invested some of that.
No, he didn't. No.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
He did not. He did not. He blew every penny he ever made. So, oh,
well, that's just,
well,
what are you can't say much to that end other than poor financial management will do a lot to ruin your life.
Yeah, but
if you're not planning accordingly for the bad times or the hard times, then sorry, like you are going to get really fucked over when those bad times come.
Yeah, apparently he blew a lot of mobile games. He spent, I believe, like tens of thousands of dollars on what's that WWE Champions. Yeah, there's a lot of lore on it. But
yeah, if I ever turn into someone like that, and I don't mean any offense to him, but if I end up as a guy who's made so much poor financial decisions despite having a really lucrative online career, you have every right to not give me any pity, and you don't have to. Like, good lord.
Yeah, no, that's a great. By the way, that's a great point by Nerd Enjoyer. I want to bundle those two things to say that, if you're anti-IDF, you're also anti-white, which is like, yeah, that's, well, anyways, let's move on. We've almost done news for an hour. So yeah, Pitiless. This was written in 2000. It's in Virilio's book, Art and Fear, as you can see here. Can you read it? Or is it reversed? I don't know, the camera.
Virilio, Art and Fear, you can read it.
Yeah. So Art and Fear was essentially about Virilio talking about the changing nature of the art world, having lacked a lot of human sentimentality or connections to nature. Now, in the 2000s, this is complicated by artists at least attempting to try to reconvene with an awareness of the natural world. You had the whole like Anthropocene movement, but that really didn't go anywhere. And it became another outbranch of activism, which is very funny because Virilio in this book, he almost takes on like a semi-social conservative position. So it's, we'll read, you'll know what I mean. So he comes down very hard on basically like Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil, Peter Thiel vision of the world. And he talks about how contemporary art has sort of embraced this escape from nature through technology. And they become sort of like, in a way, an extension of extreme sports. I remember I was very fond of this essay because when I was writing about deathmatch wrestling at the time, being this sort of like spectacle of cruelty. And I think that he talks about, for example, artists like STELARC who do these like human body modification things, putting chips in their skin, suspending himself like some kind of body fetish artist, and a number of very interesting things. Or he talks about, what's her name? What's her name? Stewart, the female artist. Meg Stewart, where she would have these performances, these dances of like contorted bodies and, simulating various atrocities throughout history and so forth. So we'll read, like, we'll jump throughout the text. So, so here he cites Albert Camus, or rather he starts it with a Camus quote, "The pitiless century, the 20th. So we've entered an age of a lack of pity, and by pity he means human sentimentality and connection to the natural world. but also he just means pity in general. So, and of course, Albert Camus, was talking about the various millenarian ideological movements in the 20th century that broke the human, including liberalism, by the way, that broke humanity down to a regimented singular body. But of course, other existentialists in France at the time, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, were, communists and Maoists and so forth. So I don't know. I guess they were kind of hypocritical in that regard. But let's read. This evening, we're going to talk about pity, piety or impiety, but about pity, the pitiful or pitiless nature of contemporary art. So we will not be talking about profane art versus sacred art, but what we may tackle the profanation of forms and bodies over the course of the 20th century. And you have to keep in mind, he was writing this at the beginning of a new century. So the early 2000s was like a haven of like edgelord culture and explorations of all sorts of like very like taboo and unseemly type of things, and basically every avenue of society. So there you go. Let's go to the text. So we will not be talking about profane versus sacred art. For those days, people get down to debate the relatively awful or awfulness of contemporary art. They generally forget to ask one vital question. Contemporary art, sure, but contemporary with what? So what is the goal of contemporary art in this century? And so then let's go down a little bit, visiting that certain place in Poland. I saw there was imagery for contemporary art, and I found the absolutely terrifying. Looking at the exhibits of suitcases, prosthetics, children's toys, I don't feel frightened. I didn't collapse. I was completely overcome the way I have been walking around the camp. So, okay, if you go down a bit more. So this is essentially him relating to the atrocities of the 20th century with the sort of like that one particular Adorno quote that he mentions later on in the essay. There can be no poetry after this certain event. So yeah, this is the quote I wanted to read. I highlighted. To humanize oneself is to universalize oneself from within, they say. Hasn't the universality of the extermination of bodies, as well as the environment from that particular area in Poland to Chernobyl, succeeded in dehumanizing us from without by shattering our own ethic and aesthetic bearings, our very perception of our surroundings? At the dawn of industrial modernity, Baudelaire declared, I am the wound and the knife. How can we fail to see that in the wake of the hecatomb of Great War, when Braque and Otto Dix, so these are, so German Expressionism and Cubism, themselves on opposite sides of the trenches in the mud of the Somme, modern art for its part forgot about the wound and concentrated on the knife, the bayonet, with likes of Oskar Kokoschka, the scalpel wielding artist, before moving on to the German Expressionism of Der Sturm, to the Viennese actionism of Rudolf Schwarzkölger and his cohort. So he, of course, Hermann Nietzsche being the famous one. So Dada theater. So again, he mentions the theater of cruelty. 20 years later, theater of cruelty would not be the one defined by Antonio Artaud, but by Kafka, that prophet of doom of the metamorphosis engineered by the camps, the smashing to smithereens of humanism. The slogan of the Futurist Manifesto was "War is the world's only hygiene." And it's very funny because this is like a Nick Land polemic. Because remember, Nick Land recently in Bap's interview with him talks about war being the sort of god of creation in a weird way. And I think that Virilio here comes down very hard on that sort of connection between accelerationism and the work of art. So here he's sort of explaining that the artists of the 20th and now 21st century have taken the lead from sort of viewing humanity as like one mass to then contort and bifurcate and split apart. And then he talks about science also having this form of expressionism. But I mean, a lot of people would go to this and say Giga Chad, yes, obviously. But I mean, what do you think of this, Prude, so far?
Sorry, I just realized I was
muted. Yeah, no problem.
Well, considering Virilio's perspective on accelerationism, I'm not particularly surprised that this is his takeaway. War is the world's only hygiene, and so it led directly to the camps and by later extension extermination of the environment with Chernobyl. I can see how some people might say Giga Chad, yes, but in this regard, I think that for him, looking now, and this is in 2000, mind you, and so you look upon the bloodiest century in recorded history, or at least that is also within living memory, and it's just like, well, here we are. And I mean, he is right. Like if you go to any museum, especially in America, although I guess this also applies to the camps as well, and I've been to some of them when I lived overseas, they do really focus purely on the cruelty and not so much the humanity of those that lived through them, or the or really anything about the surrounding location or anyone who had really survived and tell their story. It's only about the cruelty. And even if you go to the United States, so for instance, like if you go to Oklahoma City, there is this like, I hate the title of it, but there's this like First Americans Museum, which is still under construction. But when you go there, it really is what feels like nothing more but a modern art gallery. And even the artifacts that are in place and everything is told through these media lenses, with the artistry and the clash of colors to represent the good times and the bad times. So Virilio here is being very astute in that our understanding of history, aesthetically speaking, shaped by the conflicts of the 20th century, which we then use as this metaphysical hermeneutical tool to view all forms of history. So like even if you, and this sounds outlandish, or this sounds like I'm being very progressive, and I don't think that I am when I say this, but like if you were to go to that museum in Oklahoma City, or if you were to visit some other museums that are meant to be these sort of pro-native or indigenous voices or whatever they want to call themselves, they echo very similar to the kind of museums about events that took place during World War II and the rest of them. It's very deliberate, and it's really an emphasis on the cruelty or the media. And I mean, of course, the American relationship to the tribes that lived here in the New World is vastly different than anything that happened in World War II, but doesn't stop progressives from making those kind of comparisons. And you kind of see it in the architecture and the art that is meant to counteract the world that actually took place. So like, for instance, when I was there, I couldn't help but chuckle because it has this great timeline with these clash of reds and blacks about, you know, good times of highlights of like sovereignty or power and advancement in for these like tribal peoples, and then like these other, and you know, scenes for what's been bad. And I couldn't help but notice in this timeline of events that things like King Philip's War were not mentioned, or these deliberate assaults led by the Indians to racially exterminate the European settlers. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because you're not going to really want to tell that story if we're doing sort of this woe is me story of survival mentality, just like I see in other narratives that get put out about oppression or what else. So artistically speaking, yeah, I agree with Virilio in his observations so far.
Well, but I think Virilio's point would be that he sort of like neglects activist art of that variety to like highlight atrocity. He's saying that the sort of contemporary artist sort of ignores that human sentimentality and just experiments with humanity as such and with nature as such, in a very like
suffering as such.
And suffering as such in a very almost transhumanist type of way, where the human after the Great Wars have been, the sort of picture of the subject has been fundamentally collapsed, and therefore you're only like, you're literally left with like the heaps of like meat and sinew and nerve endings and you know, thoughts, memories, media. He talks about media later on.
Well, like, not to interrupt, Gio, but maybe you know this better than I do, because I'm not an art historian. But like, when Otto Dix was painting all of those sort of scenes of the post-war Germany and the those survivors soldiers, of the war, like there's anyone, you can go look up Otto Dix. These are very famous paintings. I know about them. I've seen them in person, and it's just like, so my question, Gio, is like, when he painted those, were they more about the self-expression and self-actualization of what he endured and what he saw, or would we view them as a form of activist art? Or has that really just been recontextualized after World War II to be activist art?
I think that, well, it's a bit of both, obviously. Like, I know that, for example, Kathy Kollwitz was very aware of the sort of suffering placed upon women when their husbands went off to die in the Great War. But I think that a lot of it was self-expression, but I think then later became a testament to activist art or anti-war art, because of, but I think that in a way, for as people take the German expressionists as being sort of progressive, like peacenik types, a lot of them actually did fight in the war, and a lot of them actually were quite socially conservative, including Otto Dix. Like, for example, his painting of like the sort of neglected, crippled German soldier right next to a lady of the night, if you will, in Berlin, to show the sort of like interlinkage of the remnant of death with eroticism and so forth. It's very, very interesting. And then Kirchner and George Gross would then, even though George Gross was a communist, they almost had this instinctual social conservatism where they would, go to great lengths to chastise Berlin during Weimar. In the Weimar period, Berlin was like a hotbed of all sorts of degeneracy and licentiousness you could ever imagine. It was sort of like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so the German expressionists were very critical of them. But I think Virilio's point is that they didn't take that moral or pity of the German soldier, of that sort of activist message. Rather, they just took the form of German expressionism later on in the 20th century, now the 21st century, to then create this sort of like distortion of the human. And notice how he mentions Chernobyl, because, not to say I agree with this, because I mean, I think, you all know my more pro position on modern art, but he doesn't just mention this one particular place in Poland, although he does over and over again here, but he mentions Hiroshima and he mentions Chernobyl.
And the Titanic.
And the Titanic. All of the cases where technology fundamentally leads to like this sort of like intense breaking down, this like intense cheapening of life. But it's almost reminds me of something that Father Seraphim Rose, said in his book Nihilism about Chernobyl, how the paintings of Kirchner and the paintings of Kokoschka and Auerbach and Francis Bacon, he said it reminded me of the thalidomide faces or those of the children of Chernobyl or the children of Agent Orange. He actually said this in his book Nihilism. So I think it's very
Chernobyl
funny.
happened after his death, so he might have been referencing a different disaster.
Oh, he was referencing thalidomide,
yeah,
and Agent Orange. Yeah. So, well, what year did he died in the 80s, didn't he? Though
he died in 82.
Oh wow, the really early 80s. Okay, so
yeah.
He died mysterious. He died of like a blood clot or something, or
I don't know the cause of his death off the top of my head. But for a monk living out in Platina and in the woods, not really seeing a doctor all that often, he did know that his time was near, though.
Yeah, he was only in his 60s or his 50s.
He was, I want to say, in his late 50s.
I think he was in his late 50s. Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you how old he was when he died. Couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
But anyways,
48 years old. I stand corrected. He was 48.
Oh, he was only 48?
Yeah, he died young.
Oh man. But he's an Orthodox saint, or
many consider him, but he's not been officially canonized by anybody. I mean, that's not true. There's a Georgian archdiocese that has officially canonized him as a saint. He's locally venerated by many.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's like recently the gamer saint was sanctified by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, the most recent saint for, I guess, North America has been Saint Olga of Alaska, and she died in 1979. But yeah, her glorification was just a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite a thing to see.
Oh, interesting. Oh.
Yeah.
But anyways, a lot of you trad posters are really gonna like this one. Perhaps at the junction is worth remembering Paul Celan, the German poet who committed sunsetting in Paris in 1970, the same year that painter Mark Rothko did in New York. But why stop there in art's death roll, featuring as it does a constant sunset rate from the self-destruction of Vincent van Gogh, the man with the missing ear? You would think that the drive to extinguish the suffocating culture of the bourgeois consisted specifically in oneself into the bargain, the dubious bargain of the art market, thus the great idea for wanting cultural ideas. And so later on, he goes very hard against Mark Rothko for abstracting real human sentiment into the actual material essence of painting. Our friend Paul Talk would like that very much. Remember what Friedrich Nietzsche advised: simplify your life and sunset. This extremist simplification in which the ornament is a crime has stayed with us throughout the history of the 20th century, from the pointless repeating assault on the peaks of the Champs de Mars in 1817 to the G-word I perpetuated with the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s. Avant-garde artists, like many political agitators, propagandists, and demagogues, have long understood what terrorism would soon popularize. If you want to place in revolutionary history, there is nothing easier than provoking a riot, an assault on the property in the guise of art. Well, nowadays we still have this. We still have the Just Stop Oil people.
Because like now you're attacking art.
Yeah, exactly. The art is actually attacking art. It's like anti-art is being brought into the, and let's be real. I mean, Alexander Adams had a great book about it. It's the galleries themselves that are facilitating this.
Yeah.
So, short of committing the real crime by redacting innocent passersby with a bomb, the pitiless contemporary author of the 20th century attacks symbols. The very meaning of a pitiful art he assimilates to academicism. Take Guy Debord, the French situationist, as an example. In 1952, speaking about the film Without Images, which mounted a defense of the Marquis de Sade, Debord claimed he wanted to redact the cinema because it was easier than redacting a passerby. Again, the situation. So again, this is very socially conservative. This is like Roger Scruton tier level of social conservatism in the art world. A year later, in 1952, the Situationists would not hesitate to extend this attack by trashing Charlie Chaplin, pitiful actor par excellence, vilifying him as a sentimental fraud, mastermind of misery, even proto-fascist. Well, that's crazy. That's good because like Charlie Chaplin made like one of the most like ridiculous cool anti-fascist films ever. In The Dictator. Was it called The Dictator?
Yeah, it was called The Dictator. And
yeah, it's stupid.
It's the most famous like well, I don't know if it's the most famous, but for its time, it's like the most famous anti-fascist film ever made.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I think that what Virilio just calling out here is that like the French situationists have no problem twisting themselves into a pretzel to go after the target that they want to go after. So it's like Charlie Chaplin, a known progressive and not by any means like a standard of traditional, cultural excellency that, conservatives would, love to go towards. But, oh no, for all intents and purposes, he's a proto-fascist. It's like, well, why is he a fascist now? And this is because the medium that he's a part of is what we want to attack. And we're here to get you riled up. That activism is there.
Which is funny how a lot of postmodernists like him and Baudrillard took this like they still were like on the political left, but they did take a weird socially conservative turn at the dawn of the 21st century. So then he talks about thermonuclear weapons, the balance of terror, MAD, you name it, 20th century Russia. So going down a little bit more. Let me see what I highlighted here.
Okay.
Avant-garde.
Although I kind of want to read this section while you're looking for it in your book.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah.
Inseparable from the suicidal state of representative democracies, the art of the 20th century has never ceased dangerously anticipating, or at least saluting from afar, the abomination of the desolation of modern times with their cardboard cutout dictator that keeps popping up, whether it be Hitler or the futurist Mussolini, Stalin, or Mao Zedong. It is the emblematic figures that emerge as not so much of Marcel Duchamp as Charlie Chaplin or Bonnard, the pitiful painter par excellence as was Claude Monet, that miracle worker of a rising sun, which is not so quite the same as the one rising over the laboratories of Los Alamos. The new German painting naturally represents the current sensibility in Germany, and it really frightens me. The ancients invented and represented the world of witches, but the world of hate is a modern invention, the invention of Germany spread out over a campus. Ah, well, there's that French polemic. The demons of Gothic pictures are child's play when it comes to the human, or rather inhuman, heads of humanity bent on destruction. Furious, murderous demoniacal heads, not in the style of the old masters, but in completely modern manners, scientific, choking with poison gas. They would like to carve the Germans of tomorrow out of fresh meat. So wrote the great art dealer René Gimpel in his diary in 1925. Gimpel was to disappear in a camp 20 years later on New Year's Day, 1945, thoroughly convinced of the lethal character of the works like Oscar Kokoschka and Emil Nold, the sculptor. Lembruck Gimpel goes on to tell us that there never has been any such thing as an old master art or modern or contemporary art, but that the old master shaped us, whereas the contemporary artist shapes the perception of the next generation to the point where no one is ahead of their time, for they are their time each and every day. That's great. That's a great line.
Yeah.
The contemporary artist shapes the perception of the next generation to the point where there's no one ahead of their time. I think that's very poignant for whatever Gimpel was writing, because what is contemporary art? What is it for? It's all activist art at this point. It's all for the expression of the oppressed or undeserved voices. So it's to shape the next generation and to historically re-imprint a new understanding of what has been. And so for our time, each and every day, we are to tell the next generation, this is what our time was like, and this is what all time was like. So I like that. I'm a fan.
But it's not like a prophetic vision. It's more of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you're engineering future perceptions the way that, like, for example, the boomer generation engineered the template of youth culture throughout the decades, from Gen Xers to us millennials to Zoomers. We'll notice how, like, it's almost very similar. I know she gets a lot of heat, but even like even people on the right still, like, I know Martin, for example, still reads and respects Hannah Arendt, but Hannah Arendt in Origins of Totalitarianism comes to a similar point that, like, the fact that, like whatever you may say about the mid-century and between communism and fascism and so forth, the sort of like destruction of the human comes about through scientific materialism and disenchantment more than it ever did in sort of like things like religious fanaticism, for example. And so here Gimpel is saying that, again, he's a Frenchman, so he has to have sort of like a weird anti-German polemic, but he's saying that, like, the sort of atrocities depicted in the work of contemporary art, a lot of them come about because of this sort of new understanding of the human that is thoroughly divorced from a traditional understanding of embodiedness or of nature itself, which Virilio goes on later on in the essay to go to great lengths to describing. So, and he talks about Guernica, Francisco de Goya. But here you go. This is a good part for you, Prude. If so-called old masters remain demonstrative right up until the 19th century, which with Impressionism, the art of the 20th century became monstrative in the sense that it contemporary with the shattering effect of mass societies, subject as they are to the conditioning of opinion and mass media propaganda. And this is the same mounting extremism evident in terrorism or total war. At the end of the millennium, what an abstraction once tried to pull off is the fact being accomplished before our very eyes. The end of representative art and the substitution of counterculture of a presentive art, a situation that reinforces the dreadful decline of representative democracy in favor of a democracy based on the rule of opinion in anticipation of the immediate arrival of virtual democracy. Oh boy, was he right about this? Some kind of direct democracy, or more precisely, a presentative multimedia democracy based on automatic polling. In the end, modern art was able to glean what communications and telecommunications tools now accomplish on a daily basis. The miss un abyss of the body of the figure, the abysmal nature of the body of the figure, with the major attendant risk of systemic hyperviolence and a boom in pornographic high frequency that has nothing to do with actuality. We must put out the excess rather than the fire, as Heraclitus warned. Oh my God, did he not predict our world right there? Did he not? Is that not Marshall McLuhan par excellence? Or Neil Postman rather. So, what do you?
Where did you want to go, Gio?
No, would you want to talk about this a little bit?
Oh, I mean, I would agree with this. We've stopped being representative has been, now it's presentative art. And I mean, really, it's to me, that just tells me that this is the inversion of representation. Representation is still the word that we use, but it is presentative to present a case for something. So how many of like classical plays or works have been given these revisions to present a new perspective? I mean, obviously in the defiance of the author, but also to provide this rule that like it is our opinion, it is our understanding, it is our voice, our lived experience. So now it's direct, because now it's all about what do we feel right now? We're not a democracy, we're not a government that can plan for the future, because everything right now is instantaneous. If I have groups here that feel they're not being presented with enough gibs, or they're not seeing themselves in media, we have to present the case for it. And so now we become this like vibes-based society where all of our understanding of the world is purely based on excess and misery, which this is a very astute point that Virilio is highlighting here.
But he also makes that transition from the abstract expressionism, say Jackson Pollock in the 1940s and 50s, to then the age of mass media that McLuhan was writing about in the 60s, long after, well, not long after, but like, let's say 10 years after Jackson Pollock's fatal car accident that was caused by, glug, 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 glug. But one of his favorite activities was actually driving down the highway drunk really fast. Not very good for one's longevity. It's not very good for one's health. But so he compares the goal of abstract expressionism to something that was way more vulgarized later on in mass media. Mass media is sort of like the abstract expressionism of human form in terms of data, in terms of information, in terms of technology, which is very much like a Byung-Chul Han type of point, which I believe he cites Virilio in Infocracy, his book, many times, where the sort of like subject becomes splayed out into this virtual medium, kind of like we're like living Jackson Pollock pieces. And there is no separation between the figure that is inwardly directed and what is the environment outside. And so mass media accomplishes the actual vision of the abstract expressionists way better than actual painters. But as Virilio was saying, this is like terrible, because now we're subject to anybody's opinion. Because it's kind of like our good friend Schwab says, there is such a thing as psychosecurity, where you are influenced by the sort of informational networks, and the people's even opinion of the other is sort of like a psychic force field that you have no real security against, because the actual picture of the subject, the actual frame of the subject has been imploded and has been splayed out across the digital landscape. And so this is why people get caught up in information vectors. I mean, look at how, I hate to say it, it's such a cool, like, I hate this word, but, like I think you said it last week, the one-shot thesis. It's like, yeah, people are getting one-shotted by things like AI and fucking Mike Israetel crying that he's like, I can't wait till AI gets to be inputted in a robot so I can hug him and shake his hand and say, you're great, you're amazing. I had transcendental experiences by talking to ChatGPT. It's like, we laugh at it, right? But a lot of people, like, that's, they will get one-shotted by information technology.
Well, even prior to AI, like even before GPT really blew up on, because Twitter's been around long enough for us to look at how discourse has evolved. But like, all things are about presentation. What you put into your head, this excess, this like, the desensitization of the shock of images and the meaninglessness of words. We're all with that. How much desensitization have you and I been exposed to in our, 10, 15, 20 years on the internet of, just seeing everything from Syrian civil war footage to Chinese people getting eaten up by machine accidents and industrial sites to Mexican cartel beheadings. Like, these things can be presented and desensitize you. But at the same time, right, like our understanding of the world is made by the cases that are presented to us on our timeline and what people put out beforehand. This is why Schwab's point about psychosecurity is so important, because while we don't listen to the Walter Cronkites or the Tom Brokaws of the world anymore, because that kind of media ecosystem is dying, if not already dead, What we are listening to, however, is a new age of intermediaries who are attempting to play God with the sense of omnipotence, and we can easily update our understanding of the world and our mental models with new data points, new nodes of information and networks instantaneously, which is why it's very interesting to watch thought-terminating cliches come into play, such as trusting the plan or nothing ever happens. These things become forms of auto amputation, trying to cut off from being overstimulated, lest one goes desensitized or goes numb and finds all of this meaningless because they find themselves in the state of impotency because they can no longer engage in the world. And even up here, right, pitiless contemporary art is no longer being improper, but it shows all impropriety of profanes and tortures, all the arrogance of the executioner. And so, like, yeah, there's an arrogance of there's this arrogance that gets put out in like even the media ecosystem, or even the memes we put out, because memes are pictographic, they're still an art form, not just our side of things, but even on the left, and they're terrible memes. Like, all these things become ways to go for transgression. And what's so funny is that, like, when there was a couple of weeks ago, like, some artist put out a music video. It was a British pop song or whatever. It was very sexual in nature, but it was so clean.
Oh,
in the
that
sense,
one. What's her name? The British chavette.
yeah, like, it was so
like
like,
Bobby Hill.
yeah, something like that. And it was like so incredibly like safe, edgy. Like,
Yeah.
oh, we're meant to be so transgressive and sexual, and I'm like, there's nothing transgressive here.
Safe
At least
sleazy.
it's just sleazy, and I've seen this all before, which tells me how desensitized I am, despite finding it disgusting, right? And so the images and everything else that we're exposed to nowadays has this weird, and we do it ourselves. Like, hell, what was the whole meme war, right? 2015 to 2017. That era was to be as transgressive and as edgy and as like, shit kicking as possible, because we knew that we could inflict psychic damage upon our enemies. And I think that it succeeded, because obviously a lot of people on the left have lost their fucking minds for the last 10 years, and it shows. So we've lost a great deal of intelligence. We've lost a great deal of anything that we would call norms or civility. And as we were talking about during the news hour with like Bob Villain and everything, like, everything's mask off. There is no more subtle, veiled, dog whistly expression in representation or being an impressionist or whatever that you might want to call that kind of art. Instead, it's just blanket tribal chants for terrorism.
Yeah. But what's funny though is that people were blaming, and again, this is off topic because I want to talk about Jackson Pollock a little bit more, but like, people were blaming the woke right for canceling Bob Villain's visa. It's like, I'm sorry, man, but like, blaming the right for canceling someone, especially in the UK, is like, that's insane. That's insane. We all know why his visa was revoked. It wasn't because of his saying like going against native Europeans. It's, but like, the point being is that with a mask off, it's sort of like, I still think there's a qualitative difference, or rather a quantifiable difference, because Bob Villain can say, you want your country back, you can't have it. He can say that on one of the biggest music festivals in all of Europe, Glastonbury. But like, Grapist, Mustache Man Graper 88 on Twitter can tweet the most ridiculous genocidal things, but again, they're like in a Twitter group chat. They're, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a bit of a difference between large irony leftist accounts that have connections to journalists and just, like, like avian account groypers on Twitter letting off, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there still is a quantifiable difference, but at the same time, I think that both are not to make like a whole like centrist point. Like, I'm not pulling a James Lindsay here, but like, there is something to be said about like the sort of reification of discourse on the extremes, that if things were to have gone differently a little bit in our lifetimes in the early 21st century, and even let's say the latter half of the 20th century, then I think that maybe discourse wouldn't have been this way. But then, like you were saying about Marshall McLuhan, Lewis Mumford, Jacques Ellul, these things become reified to a razor sharp edge point because of the very mediums of telecommunicative technology that exist nowadays that necessitate that these things happen. And so here he says something very interesting about journalists as well. Speaking of journalists, the intelligence of representation then gives way to the stunned mullet effect of a presence that is not only weird, as in the days of surrealism, but insulting to the mind. The whole process, moreover, implies that the image suffices to give art its meaning and significance. And this is what I talk about in my book, by the way, the supremacy of the image in the internet age. Not literacy, but rather we live in an imagistic reality. At one extreme, the artist, like the journalist, is redundant in the face-off between performer and viewer. Oh my God. He wrote this in 2000. And now we have, what is a journalist now? A journalist is just an opinion columnist. A journalist is just a substacker. A journalist is just a blogger. A journalist is just a poster. There is no meaningful difference. And the artist is a content creator. And so he said he views this.
What is Nina Jankowicz?
Yeah.
Like this woman whose earliest like online records are like what, dirty songs about Harry Potter and fan fiction. Like Nina Jankowicz, the whole fucking like disinformation czar for like 2 seconds, right?
Oh, that one.
Yeah. And so she's got all those like old videos from when she was young, younger than us, talking about like all the dirty shit she wants to do because she was like a Harry Potter fanatic. And now it's like she's still a theater girl. Now she's just like 41 years old, and a progressive. But like, at one extreme, the artist, like the journalist, is redundant between performer and viewer, because you are a performer, but you're also viewing this stuff and you're consuming it because you're trying to mimic it. Because just like in the art world, we're looking at our contemporaries and seeing what we can learn from them and how to outperform them. And it's pretty good. It's good.
How many stories have been broken by anons on 4chan? Like, do you remember the certain island by a certain person who may not have sunsetted? You know who got the images of the weird like dentistry chair? It was an anon on YouTube. He had a burner YouTube account called @RustyShackelford, which is the King of the Hill reference. Yeah. And it's like, because Dale Gribble was he used that name as like, because he was a conspiracy theorist, he used that name as a way of ordering pizzas so the government didn't have his real name. So I thought that was pretty clever. But so here he says, such a conception of information leads to disturbing fascination with the image-filled live, with scenes of violence and gruesome human interest stories. Ignacio Ramona writes on the impact of television on the print media. This demand encourages the supply of fake documents, sundry reconstructions, and concepturing checks. Oh my God! Like, again, it's like it may have seemed like so obvious to Virilio, but the fact that he was like writing this in the year 2000, it's like how much. Like, we just talked about AI slop distorting people's perceptions of reality. But surely we could say the same today of art when it comes down to it. Take the example of the new neurotic realism of admin and collector Charles Saatchi. I actually have a friend who has certain paintings bought by Charles Saatchi. As revealed in the London, New York exhibition sensation, with its fusion/confusion of the tabloid and some sort of, what does he say there? Would-be avant-garde art. So again, media entering into art. I mean, does anyone remember the LD50 gallery where it's like, let's take a bunch of Twitter posters from Fog Twitter and put their tweets in a gallery? Does anyone remember that? So there you go. So anyway, scroll up, Prude.
I like that though. New neurotic realism.
Yeah, we oh man, that'd be a great Substack title for you.
Well, it's all I even just the words neurotic realism. Like, I feel like there's some, I don't know the term in which it's being used in this artistic context because I'm not familiar with this part of the art world. But like, there is this neurotic realism in all political analysis that I see today.
Yeah,
because behind, like, you just scratch a very thin layer of veneer on anyone's writing, and this is also an indictment of myself. But you'll see people's neuroses spring out. Like nobody's business, while still trying to ground yourself as this authentic, realistic analyst of whatever issue.
Yeah. The new neurotic realism was a term coined by the art collector Charles Saatchi, who is one of the most famous art collectors ever, to describe a new wave of British art so the young British artist that championed in the late 1990s, or rather he championed. So I believe he was responsible for he had dealings with like Damien Hirst and a lot of other young British artists, and focused on artists whose work explored themes of modern life, playful, sometimes darker, often ironic sensibilities. The influence of the YBAs, while distinct, new neurotic realism built upon the YBA shock value and engagement with contemporary art, playful and experimental, immersive art, all sort of like making like everyday life a sort of extension of, mixed like sort of media apparatus itself, like blowing away your perception of reality, and sort of like, especially with the cultural shift in London in the 1990s with like the Britpopper thing, it became like this sort of like like this wonderland of perceptions in a weird way. So for example, Tomoko Takahashi created installations using discarded technology and everyday objects. So I mean, Nam June Paik would be like, but he was operating, back in the 70s. And then, you had like, Tracy Emin with her tent, everyone ever slept with, and stuff like that. So new neurotic realism is sort of like, it's very funny because that sentiment is still with us, Prude. Like, there still is a neuroticism to people's perceptions of reality in the digital world. And I think that the art world has sort of like retreated from that since the age of the YBAs, because now like all art has to be activist art. And so therefore, there still is a sense of neuroticism there, but rather than doing this like social realism tapestry where, sort of like what Mark Fisher called acid communism, where your perceptions are fundamentally changed by technology that is almost like an acid trip. It's like nowadays, it's like a lot of contemporary activist art, they sort of shut that off. And they have a different form of histrionic neuroticism towards whatever, pet identity group there is. Stuff that a few months ago, at the beginning of the year, actually, Dean Kissick's brilliant article in Harper's Magazine talks about identity politics in the art world. I highly recommend that. We actually covered that in the show. So if the contemporary author is redundant, see Picasso on Guernica, as if the sunset rate has only kept accelerating in cultural circles to the point where it will soon be necessary to set up a wall of the Federated Commune of sunsetting in museums to match the wall of the Federal Communes of the Paris Commune in Père Lachaise Cemetery. Then make no mistake, the art lover's days are numbered. This is how Rothko put it. I studied the figure, only reluctantly did I realize it didn't correspond to my needs. Using human representation for me meant mutilating it. Short of all, well, I mean, of course, he wasn't very good at human figures. Short of all moral or emotional compromise, the painter seeks to move towards the elimination of all obstacles between the painter and the idea, between the idea and the onlooker. And so what do you get in the 80s and 90s? And then later on in the early 2000s, you get relational aesthetics, where now it's like you are involved in the creation of the work of art. You like walk through a zone, like you got like the Richard Serra, like he turns you in this room that keeps going around and around and around. Or, you're walking through someone's living room, but it's in an art gallery. Or like Tracy Emin's bedroom, you get to see it. You get to, I don't know if you get to sleep with Tracy Emin, but you know what I mean. Like relational aesthetics then comes out as the sort
Is she
of like
part of the rationalist side of Twitter?
Tracy Emin was the Ayala of the art world, I have to say.
Oh, then you probably did.
Oh my god.
For a price, I'm sure.
No, but I think
Tracy Emin had fluffers.
Well, I mean, I'll plead the fifth on that one. I actually wrote about Tracy Emin back in the day, back in my WordPress. No, but so now even the painter is in this sequence of the collapse, not just between artist and audience, but the very definition of what art and audience capture and the very medium of the art world itself. So in a way, like, the artist becomes part of the idea that lives on past the confines of the canvas or the board and now has to become this thing that emerges into the consciousness of the artist. So, I mean, of course, like the example people use the most is, Marina Abramovic really experiments with a lot of this. Like there's that one where the audience can go into like this dark room and like 20 at a time, and they can like meditate with these headphones and these like these what do they call those night, the when you're sleeping, what do they call those, blinds, yeah, night blinds, and you sit there and you listen to, I believe it's like the heartbeat of Marina Abramovic or something like that she recorded medically. I forget what the exact one is, but she's been very big in this sort of like using like technology to challenge the embodiedness or sort of the solid state between the artist and the audience themselves. And a lot of people, they say like, well, it's because Marina Abramovic is the top globalist satanic artist who's doing these rituals and so forth. And so I find her work interesting. I know the spear cooking thing was really I think a low point compared to her other artworks, but it's the one that garnered her the most awareness among normies. So, but here Virilio says that, but this sudden overexposure of the work of his, the sudden overexposure of the work as of those who look upon it is accompanied by a violence that is not only symbolic, as before, but practical, since it affects the very intentionality of the painter. To those who find my paintings sincere or serene, I'd like to say that I have trapped the most absolute violence in every square centimeter of the surface. Mark Rothko confesses before proving the point by turning this repressed fury against himself on a certain day in February 1970. Because again, Mark Rothko said that he wanted to capture human emotion through these evanescent sort of floating swabs of paint that he would layer, then he'd do the turpentine burns, so that it's almost like walls of color were appearing on the canvas, which is something that I noticed a lot of like animators in the 70s and 80s after Rothko. They tried to do a lot of very similar, almost like psychedelic type of techniques, like that one 70s French animation film, Fantastic Planet, had a lot of, but yeah, I mean, I guess, Mark Rothko actually lived his artwork, unfortunately. So 30 years on, how can we fail to feel the concentration of accumulated hate in every square meter of the uncivil cities of this fin de siècle, this, sickness of the century? Go one night and check on the basements or underground parking lots of suburban council estates, all that the clandestine rave parties and backroom brothels are only ever the tourist trappings of, so to speak. After having only reluctantly abandoned the figure on the pretext of not mutilating it, the American painter then chose to end this life himself, as well by exercising the most nihilistic of freedoms of expression, that of self-destruction. This gets back to Nietzsche here. If God died in the 19th century, according to Nietzsche, what is the best that the victim of the 20th century will not turn out to be? The creator, the author, this heresy of the historical materialism of the century of the machines. But before we bid the artist farewell, we should not forget for a moment that the words pity and piety are consubstantial, something the members of the Holy Inquisition obviously overlooked. Let's not repeat their crimes. Let not become negationists of art. To suffer or to sympathize with, this is the question that concerns both ethics and aesthetics. That was clearly intuited by Guerrico, the man who made his famous portrait of the insane at La Salpêtrière, I can't pronounce that, hospital in Paris, over the winter of 1822. At the invention of one Dr. Greget, founder of the social psychiatry, Guerrico portraits were meant to serve as classificatory sets for the alienist students and assistants. So that's very interesting there. That's almost like a Foucauldian point where Guerrico was creating portraits of insane people, but it wasn't necessarily for the work of art itself, but it was for like this weirdly invasive cartography of insanity, the way that you'd have like medical graphs or documentation in the medical field and psychiatry. Like a lot of it was like very invasive, but then he created this sort of like new aesthetic sensibility of like moroseness and death and so forth by like literally doing portraits of insane people. So I mean, I can only think of like people that do contemporary portraiture with, all sorts of like, weird creatures of the internet age, the various like antiopods of Discord kittens and so forth that you could potentially do portraits of. I wonder what that would look like.
I find this part interesting. Just earlier above, that what is the victim of the 20th century? Will it not turn out to be the creator? And that's particularly interesting how the word creator gets used now in the 21st, because it's not like, I mean, you're an exception because you are an artist and you are a painter and you post what you paint on here. But I mean, this is entertainment product, what you and I are doing. This is not a work of art. What has become of the creator has been in this very Deleuzian sense, just like a production machine. We're compelled to do it. We are desiring machines, and we desire to create things. We're production machines. And in doing so, like, we're not really creating for the sake of the human expression. We're creating for the sake of the algorithm, the sake of being seen, the sake of money, not for the sake of whatever it is that we have to say. Now, to some extent, depending on your politics, that might change, because obviously if I wanted to make more money, I'd be a leftist, because it's very easy to make money as a leftist, or it'd be very easy to do a 2.5 hour long video retrospective on some TV show that came out in 2007 and ran for 5 seasons or whatever. But you're not in there for that, because you're in there for something else. Pity and piety are consubstantial, something that members of the Holy Inquisition overlook. That's particularly interesting, because there is pity and piety, and I would agree that they are closely linked. I don't know if they have consubstantiality in the theological sense, but like, it is true. To be pious is also to feel the pity, or to feel some sense of burning. Which all this is particularly just interesting to me, because it's just like, the creator, the artist, to do things for artistry's sake. I mean, what has the art world been reduced to the average person? It's not a place of great creators. It's not a place where great interrogations of life's work and meaning happen. It's money laundering. Oh, it's where the Epsteins of the world go meet up or do spirit cooking and shit like that, to reference Abramovic and whatever. And so to the average mind, like, if there's this death of anything, what has it come about in this age of the digital era, where finally the 20th century has come to a close? It's that we are materialists, and that's really all that's left. There is no soulful expression anymore, at least for most people.
And he talks about science. Well, it's pretty spicy later on, but that part about creation, I think it does all go back to it really does go back to what he was saying about Nietzsche, how the sort of thesis of the death of God. This is something that John David Ebert said about artists in the 19th and then later the 20th century, how there was the demand to create, there was demand to then, if God is dead, or a conception of God is dead, you are lowering the responsibility of creation onto the subject. And who better to be a creator of a sort of vision of it, or a totalizing vision of the world, than the artist? And so now the artist has to live, which is, oh my God, ironically enough, that's in Paul Talk's book, Art in the Age of Anxiety. The sort of like anxiety of the artist is almost like, in a weird way, the reverse. I mean, don't quote me on this. I'm not very, but like the anxiety of influence thesis by Harold Bloom.
Yeah.
Where it's like isn't it like the sort of anxiety that comes about from having to live up to the creation of the previous greats or Western canon or whatever?
Partially, yeah.
Yeah, I could be wrong about this, but it's almost like the reverse, where it's like the anxiety that comes about.
It mainly had to do with poetry. It's that you're always feeling this antagonism, that you feel the influence of the masters, but also you want your own voice. And so we always have to redefine the precursor.
Yeah. and so in a way, like it's sort of similar, but in a way it works the opposite, where the artist is now under this immense anxiety of creating via negativa, of creating anew, now that the creator has sort of been, shown the door in our civilization. It's like now we're left in the sort of like ashes of history, or what John David Ebert calls the midden heap of history, where the artist has to emerge out of the sort of like scavenger pile. Like, the artist is perpetually like in the episode of Junkyard Wars, where they have to like create something out of the ashes in the sort of trash heap and the wrecking yard of history, and in the absence of God. And so there sort of is like an anxiety of not just social relevancy, but also creating a total vision of the world. But then I think, like in Paul Talk's book, he talks about like, why do artists have to do that? Why can't they just paint? Why do they have to have a total vision of the world? I think where I disagree with Paul Talk is that I think like the time we live in almost demands it in a weird way, even though it's wrong, even though it's terrible. It's almost like we're constantly being, by a weird, unseen metaphysical force, we're almost being forced to create reality anew in our own vision. And it's kind of like a weird, like hyperstitional age, to quote Nick Land. And I don't think, like, people that talk about hyperstition in academia, or the ones that still are not afraid of talking about Nick Land in academia, for a time in the 2000s, this was like a very fun and sexy concept, but now it's like terrifying. It's like people release in the work of art and media and content creation, and even just online discourse. People will create all sorts of ergogores and tulpas and golems, and it's not very fun, So it's like almost like we're like the bastard children of creation, having to create something else, and it's just not. It's not working out.
But it's because everyone wants to mimic.
Yeah,
I think has a lot to do with it. There's this desire to imitate, but also to be your own guy. And so, like, when I'm not listening to like the content of my friends, my YouTube like playlists and the things that my YouTube like listening or viewing history is very normie coded, because I don't want to be consuming the stuff 24/7, in part because I think I'd go absolutely more insane than I already am. But I watched this this video where he was being really meta, and this gentleman was criticizing just like the world of video game critique, and he was being very meta, and he's like, listen, not everyone has to be like Joseph Anderson. Not everyone has to be like these big names, because when you're trying to imitate these people, all that you're doing is cribbing a style, and you're losing the point of criticism. You're losing the point of pointing out what was good, or even pointing out objective facts about some sort of experience that you were having in said game. And what all that you're doing is that you are essentially imitating the master, or the person that you consider to be the master. And from there, it's like you've lost any chance to be your own man. And instead, all that you have done is made this quote unquote scene or discipline worse, because you're too desperate to get the approval of the precursors that are still on the platform. They're not dead. They're just older than you and have been doing this longer than you. And you desperately want their affection. And I feel like that gets really echoed today. In context of what Virilio is writing here decades ago, because it's just like, well, what are we dealing with now? It's this anxiety to be noticed. Notice me, senpai. Like there's this very pick me attitude.
Well, the old heads notice me.
Yeah. Will I be noticed? Will I get added to the group chat this time? I don't know.
And what ends when the old heads shatter? What will become of us?
And then we'll become the old heads, and then we'll be ridiculed.
Oh man, we already are.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Driven by a passion for immediacy, Garrico sought to seize the moment. I quite like Garrico. I think like his shipwreck painting was one of the greatest creations of that particular genre of his time. But driven by the passion for immediacy, Garrico sought to seize the moment, whether of madness or of death, live. Like the emergent press, again, because you have to realize at the time of painting, this was the beginning of like print media going into full swing, right? And so I believe he started off as a court illustrator and then later moved on to other like more semi-government official illustration jobs. He was especially keen on human interest stories, such as the wreck of the Medusa, the Titanic of the painting world. Yeah, that's the famous one, the wreck of the Medusa. The art of painting at the time was already busy trying to outdo mere representation by offering the very present of the event, as instantaneous photography would do, followed by the photo finish and the first cinematographic newsreel of the Lumiere brothers, and ultimately live coverage offered by CNN. Interactivity was actually born in the 19th century with the telegraph, certainly, but also especially with clinical electricity, which involved planting electrodes in the faces of the human guinea pigs, used in such medieval art as the practiced by Dr. Duchesne de Boulonnais. The recent Duchesne exhibition at École du Beaux Arts de Beaux Arts Paris aimed no less than to rehabilitate Duchesne. Is that Duchesne or Duchesne? I forget.
Duquesne.
Duquesne, yeah.
I don't know. Duquesne, I don't know.
Yeah, expressionist of the passions from which his patients' faces were only ever laboratory material. You know, it's funny. Anna Mendieta actually had an art series where she would like press her face up against glass, and it would come off very like distorted. Like, you know, when like you're a kid and you're like coming in from recess and you have like the glass doors, like the glass and your friends are making fun of you by pressing their faces like she had a photo series like that, Anna Mendieta, which I believe took inspiration from Duquesne's medical cartography photos. So maybe let's jump ahead a little bit, Prude.
Yeah, sure.
Going down. Oh, he talks about the French Revolution. There you go. Then he talks about the German painters. So go up a little bit. But the truly decisive step had to wait until much more recently, till 1988, with the World of Bodies exhibition at the Mannheim Museum of Technology and Work, where close to 800,000 visitors rushed to contemplate 200 human corpses presented by Gunther von Hagen. I believe I have a cousin who actually went to see that. But then if you go up a little bit more, he talks about the French Revolution.
The World of Bodies. You know, it's still going, or at least it was for quite some time. I've been to that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It would go on tour, and they would bring out the cadavers and the bodies and the nervous systems and the, babies and everything. Quite a memento mori type situation, but it was very much presented in this very dry, mechanical understanding. Very interesting.
Yeah. Already with the 18th century, just prior to the French Revolution, this confusion of the cold-bloodedness was made of perception that allowed the doctor or surgeon to diagnose illness due to the ability to repress emotional pity, had contaminated the artistic representation of naturalistic painters and engravers. Jacques Cocteau, for instance, as a painter and atomist, talks about like the various engravings of the French Revolution. So here he talks about how it's very funny. I'm not going to name these two people because they're both anons.
Yeah.
And I think my one friend would not want me to name him, but he was associated with a certain forum, put it that way.
Okay.
He was arguing with a certain Finnish account about the nature of the American Revolution in relation to the French Revolution, and the French Revolution being a sort of form of extreme materialist desacralization of political life that subsumes itself into the mass of humanity. Fraternity, equality, fraternity, whatever. The three. What is it? Fraternity, equality. The three. Man, I forget the third one.
Fraternity, liberty, and equality.
Equality, yeah. Fraternity, liberty, equality. So you have like the inklings of those sort of millenarian ideologies, to which we include liberalism, by the way.
Yeah.
In the 20th century, in the French Revolution, where you have this sort of emptying out of the sacred, this violent pouring out of the ancient regime. that was disrupted. Now, I understand, like, there's certain, like, American conservatives that, they, even Burke at the time, Edmund Burke, had more...
An Englishman.
An Englishman, but even, like, the founding fathers themselves had way more charitable interpretation of the French Revolution. And so my one mutual, he was railing pretty hard against the American Revolution as an extension of the French Revolution, which, is a valid debate. I don't want to offend the Americans in our audience, but I think that there is something to be said about the very strict fanatical materialism of the French Revolution having come about at the time that led to what Virilio was talking about. So Virilio is almost making like a Joseph de Maistre type of point. You know what I mean? About the French Revolution and the dehumanization of the subject and the destruction of pity. But also I think that before we go on, because I know you're itching to read the McLuhan bit here.
Well, I'm just scrolling. I don't really know what you want to cover.
No, we'll cover the McLuhan bit.
Because I didn't know what we were going to be reading entirely today until 5 minutes ago.
I told you last week. Anyways,
no, I know, but I mean, I didn't. Doesn't matter. Go on.
No, anyways, so no, but what I was saying, Prud, is that the whole point about pity, and like to address certain criticisms of this work, is that what I think, and he talks a little bit about it, but I don't think we're going to get to the whole essay because it's been 2 hours. But like, what I think Virilio did not see, because he couldn't have seen this, because if you realize, like, having lived through it, I mean, I know there's Zoomers in the chat that didn't live through it, or they were babies at the time. But the early 2000s was like a heyday of like chud edgelord culture everywhere, and I think at the time people didn't really see that even in the 1990s there were things going on that preempted the world that we live in now, especially the 2010s. So I think that Virilio is saying that yes, there is an absence of pity in the art world. There's this absence of pity in mass media that was then both of those things, media, culture, the arts, then explode on the internet, to which in 2000, when he was writing this, was the early days of those very, very sort of unique social pressures that were then created by the internet that we all basically live in nowadays. If you are watching this show, you are an internet addict, okay? You're eternally online. Not to say that's a bad thing. But what I think he did not see is he didn't anticipate the reintroduction of pity into the work of art. But that reintroduction during the 2010s and the mid-2000s was incredibly dangerous because it was the weaponization of pity against the very societies that these artists were operating in and continue to operate in. And a lot of my book talks about this. So even when you try to reintroduce the concept of pity in the contemporary art, that pity is then weaponized against the host. And we see this in all manners of activist art during the 2000s and 2010s up until nowadays. And I think that no better representation of the mutilation and weaponization of pity that is also, by the way, aided by the same technologies that Virilio was criticizing, humans of flat design. That's like the best example. And so I think Virilio did not see that even the reintroduction of pity is a way of sort of mutilating the South. And any popular like left-coded video essayist, I mean, they're really just talking about the abstractions that don't really mean much of anything nowadays. Because those abstractions about pity and sentimentality and representation and egalitarianism, those things are basically just ammunition for the culture war. And in a way, I think Virilio didn't even see that, even though he saw a lot of prophetic things here. But I think that Virilio could not have anticipated that. And so even pity itself has become a weapon of the culture war. And it's being used against the very traditions that Virilio is lamenting, such as, the contemporary artists, they try to go back to nature. They talk about the Anthropocene, but lo and behold, it's the whole like Extinction Rebellion nihilism of like basically cosmic pessimism or ethylism or whatever. And it's not really about nature. It's really just like this anti-human misanthropic polemic. Even though there are some artists who do embrace nature and who have gone back to a more naturalistic approach to the work of art, but even the activism attached to the artist going back to the natural world is ultimately a polemic against the human itself, which is something Virilio would not agree with. It was something that Virilio could even have foresawn, even, you know, with even when the artist goes back to nature, it's still like an anti-humanism at its most fundamental sense, right? Not to say all anti-humanism is wrong. There certainly is a lot of critique of what mass man has become. But I think that the utter destruction of the picture of the human is something that we see nowadays. And I could name certain groups or whatever, but, you know, this is YouTube, so you can sort of guess people that play fast and loose with the picture of the subject and the sort of embodiness of the human. So, man, that was a long rant. Oh, wow.
It was good.
I hope someone clipped that. This is 2-hour 2 mark. Hope someone clips that rant. So it makes my life a lot easier with YouTube Shorts. So, but what do you think of that, Prue? What do you think about
that? Like the beginning part with the French Revolution, like the pitilessness there, I think we can't ever excuse. You have to, I guess it always has to come with the context, right? Like, why does that pitilessness emerge? There's a great famine. There's this overproduction of men who are trying to pursue titles of nobility that are constantly being inflated and essentially valueless. So you're not really having anything that can provide for your posterity if you have a family. And so, you know, let them have it. Give it to them. Let them bleed. And that pitilessness still exists even to this day. Although, as Virilio points out, like this presentation that now emerged is meant to elicit pity. But pity dies because we've become desensitized to the case that's presented to us. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is the thing that I find the most interesting about this piece and what you were talking about, Gio, is that we're meant to try and echo back to these horrors that are presented to us. But at the same time, we become pitiless people because we're desensitized to it, or we know that there's a case, or that there's a catch, or that it's for activism in and of itself. I mean, is it a great tragedy that someone loses a very young child? Absolutely. But when an image like that is then turned into an idol, or it's turned for a presented rallying cry for something, your heart is hardened and you become without pity. And I mean, a really good example of that, let's go back, I don't know, 12 years ago.
The Turkish
that small Syrian boy that died in like the Turkish shore, that became this rallying cry of the migration crisis in the early 2010s. And there's been countless other cases of drowning, or photos or videos of it, or whatever. And you become incapable of pity.
Cecily Brown painted that boy, if I recall.
Yeah, he did. And I know that there was a painting of it. I don't know if it was that specific artist, but like it had became this rallying cry in the same way that like you could become so pitiless in art that it becomes nothing more than a total transvaluation, or this inversion of whatever the original artwork was meant to be. I mean, this is a very crude example, but I think it's kind of applicable in our digital age. Let's go back 5 years ago, right? We're in the height of the Summer of Floyd. We have all these artists, we have all these murals, we have all this like artistic performance revivalism that comes with, for lack of a better term, just like this pious black people worship that came out of that era.
LARPing, like LARPing Black Panther activism.
Yeah, LARPing is Black Panther activism, but also like Negro spiritual revivalism.
Yeah.
And but like the legacy of George Floyd today is what? Come on, Gio, you know it. You know it.
George Floyd.
Floyd. Like,
nobody cares. No one on the political left cares about him anymore.
No, and I mean that. And if you were like a die-hard leftist, you could be like, see, even like the neoliberal left doesn't care about black and brown bodies or whatever. But like for us, like the pitilessness is there because it's like, well, he wasn't murdered. He died of a drug overdose, and the only existing legacy of this black guy that burned 1,000 American cities is this creepy NFT crypto coin avatar of RoboCop George Floyd that's running on a fentanyl reactor. Like, that's an insane thing to think about. That in 5 years' time, this presented case for progressive moral piety has been transfixed to be nothing more but a presented case to, like, get me some shit coins to make me a little bit of money in this cycle's pump and dump, right? Like, it's that, to me, is, if you were to ask anyone like 5 years ago, well, that's terrible. How dare we turn this, like, archetypical, like, progressive martyr figure,
secular saint,
the secular saint, into something like that. And it's just like, well, just wait, because I have no pity. Because I don't see, you and I have a totally different value system. And what you present to me is nothing more than this case to issue and hearken unto some sort of moral system. Because all artistic expression is an expression of one's own morality. And instead, I'm pitiless to it. I don't care about it. Why? Because it's used, your morality is used as a rhetorical, metaphysical, and political cudgel against my own existence. And now art itself has become this sense where I look at art not just as this activism piece, but I'm seeing an intermediary for a system or a patron or a group that is telling me how to view and understand the world. I'm being catechized. And this is what James Polis talks about in his book, Human Forever. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of person you are, if you're like a neo-Luddite or you're a big tech appreciator, you're all going to be catechized by the art forms and the language and the systems of our digital world today. And I mean, even, he calls McLuhan here like bucolic, but it's just really kind of funny because during the whole, issues in with Quebec in the late 70s, this TV interview happens. I think it's in like 76. And the interviewer on this Canadian news program is just like, well, what about the global village? I thought this was meant to be something more. And McLuhan is very adamant. He's just like, no. And like, now we're all aware of each other. And when we know each other, we hate each other.
Yeah.
Like, he's very apt to the point that in the present moment in which I can see a person for who they are or what they do when no one else is supposed to be looking, i.e. the traditional interpretation of integrity, and I can watch someone just horrendously lay into their child or act like a total asshole while trying to be this artistic creator or paragon of a certain system, why do I care? Right? Yeah. Like, now all of a sudden, in this age where I constantly know anything at all times at once, if I can recall it, grok, is this true? Or looking up the artist or looking up the tweets or doing the old like Solion test where I look up the words depression or mental illness or whatever on some leftoid's like Twitter history of their tweets.
It is cruel.
Like, all of a sudden, like, I have become pitiless because I have already now concluded in my own worldview and my own a priori assumptions of the world, there is nothing in here that I find human. There's nothing in here worth my time. And whatever artistic expression that you may have, what's the point? And the best example of that pitiless art, especially to the terrible sensibilities of our liberal and progressive friends, was who decided to use AI to finish that unfinished purple painting for that AIDS patient?
His name was Demel or something.
So great, but like to progressives, we're heartless, we're pitiless. We don't care. If anything, we'll mock you.
There was something, and I think like to really, because you have to realize, like, Virilio still is a man of the new left, right?
Oh, very much so.
And so even though he has a strain of social conservatism, same with Baudrillard, he would still say, like, he still used the word fascism here up and down the text, right? Because in a way, like, you could say that, like, which is funny, talking about the Peter Thiel interview, like a new fascism is sort of like pure expressionism of the human form using technology in a very, like, for lack of a better term, Nietzschean vitalist sense or whatever. But there was something that our good friend Orkbrand said once on Twitter, which I thought was incredibly profound, even though it's a very simple observation by if you've been paying attention for the past 10 years. He said that, when the political right talks about our enemies, we just hate you. We hate you because we know you hate us. And we don't make any ands, ifs, or buts about it. In other words, like you were saying, Prude, that brilliant point, that there is a pitilessness to it. When we make fun of you, we are going to complete the Keith Haring painting that he did not complete as a symbol of him dying of what.
Yeah.
And, I do quite enjoy a lot of Keith Haring pieces. People don't realize that Keith Haring in the 60s was a Jesus freak. People don't realize that. He was more complex, but for argument's sake, as a secular saint of the progressive LGBT plus Q movement, Keith Haring is a god that experienced an iconoclastic shivving at the hands of AI. And this was fueling the anti-AI polemic about these MB kids with Wacom tablets and so forth. You know, because a lot of them basically produce illustrations that are like AI, so who cares? But
it's all very Cal art.
Yeah, Bean Mouth. Yeah. So Orkbrand was saying that we just hate you. We don't make a grand claim, but we said the leftists, when they attack us, it always has to be in sort of like a moralistic language. And he goes, I find that so alien. Because in politics, there is no morality. Let's be real here. That's what he said. But you're making a moralistic claim. But in actuality, you have the same pitiless sadism that any frog, any griper, any, you know,
any right-winger on Twitter,
any right-winger, any anon right-winger, any Peter X, whatever on Twitter, like, you are just as you actually are actually more sadistic. Because even though, you know, Trump is in power or whatever, in terms of like general cultural power and sort of the sort of like machinations of transnational progressivism.
Unironically, like, the best example of what you're describing is Will Stancil.
Exactly. Will Stancil has tweeted more deranged things than any like frog account that he goes after or tries to dox.
And his Fed posted more than you and I combined.
Exactly. But the difference is that even though like Will Stancil is like a lolcow and like a lot of leftoids hate him, who's in more of a position of power? And yes, you could say like certain posters have the ear of JD Vance or whatever. But really, in terms of material political power, who has more power than you? Does Zero HP Lovecraft have more power than Garbage Ape or Will Stancil or Airbagged or any like sick irony leftist that like Juniper? Who has more political power in this world? Zero HP Lovecraft or Juniper?
Is Juniper the onion person?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know his actual name, but yeah.
But the point being is that we know who has more political power.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, you can make some conspiracy theories about Silicon Valley and the new emerging right and JD Vance, but in terms of actual cultural legitimacy, who gives lectures at the new school? The deranged schizo DJ that used to be part of the post-left, but now he's not, and he hates them, or Amy Therese, who was a part of the post-left, but then became on the right. Who has more political power? Who has more cultural capital? That DJ in New York that lectures the new school, or Amy Therese, right? So that's Orkbrand's, obviously, right? So like that's Orkbrand's point, is that it's very funny how they have to frame things as a reintroduction of morality and pity when they are the most pitiless people imaginable. And it's like, don't lie. And this is what Orkbrand is saying. He says this, he doxes himself and he's like, you want to come and hurt me? Go ahead. I live in Poughkeepsie, New York, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't lie about it. Don't make a fool of yourself by lying about it, by using this moralistic language. Because we all know that in the world of online politics, there's no such thing as traditional morality. And
that's also Schmidt's criticism when progressives use the word humanity. Because he's like, listen, we all know that you're going to use this word to justify the most cruel, inhumane practices known to man. And for the European project, that is concerning with regards to war and the prosecution of how war plays out. Because that is the great concern after the First World War, is sort of constraining what has already come. Yes. And so it's like, okay, well, like, let's be honest, progressives, like you want things to be nice and civil and sane, but we know at the end of the day, like, what is this for? It is because you are just as pitiless as your so-called fascists that you hate, and that you have no problem making sure that like those guys don't get to breathe tomorrow, because that's really what you want out of this. That's it. And your artwork shows it, because your artwork is very much offering this futuristic vision of what's to come, and it's all like, oh, it's just death.
Yeah.
But covered in this like futuristic vision of like, oh, isn't it nice that we're like this?
Oh, by the way, Owen Zaleski said that the artist was named Danelle Village. I remember Danelle Village did the AI edit of the Keith Haring piece. So thank you, Owen Zaleski. But no, go up a little bit, Prude. I wanted to read that part about McLuhan.
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Here's
Why
Marshall
does he not
McLuhan.
like McLuhan? This is weird.
Yeah.
Here, Marshall McLuhan, the bucolic prostrator of the global village. If you really want to know what's going on in the present, we should first ask artists. They know a lot more than scientists and technocrats since they live in the absolute present. Here we find the same line of thought in Rene Gimple, only deformed by the Canadian sociologist media-haunted ideology. What is the absolute present? The absolute is surely tautological, if not the resurgence of a classicism that already laid claim to the eternal present of art, even going so far as to freeze it in geometric standards. Witness the golden mean, bearing no relationship to the relative and ephemeral nature of analogical perception of events. Impressionism would try to free us from these standards on the threshold of industrial modernity. Contrary to appearances real time, this present that imposes itself on everyone is a speeding up of daily reality, is in fact only ever the repetition of the splendid academic isolation of bygone days, a mass media academicism that seeks to freeze all originality and all poetics in the inertia of immediacy, which is the exact same point that Paul Talk has against neoclassicism. So I think like Virilio is very conscious of saying that you can't like contemporary art has gone one way in one extreme with preempting the future, which is like this endless Heideggerian abstraction, which is something that Paul Talk would say. And neoclassicism has gone the other by saying, oh, we already have the present is the eternal, it's frozen in amber, don't do anything else. It's like, that's what you got to do. But then, of course, Impressionism is this like third way that he's going towards. So inertia is a raw form of despair, Sinoff proclaimed. That's a great line. Inertia is a raw form of despair. But let's go almost to the end, Prude. Page. We can do this next week if you want.
Yeah, let's continue it next week.
We'll continue next week. I'm sure there's probably going to be other news and happenings by that time. But let's go to here he starts with science and biology. Extreme arts, such as transgenic practices, aim to nothing less than to embark biology on the road to a kind of expressionism, whereby territoriology will no longer be content just to study malformations, but will resolutely set off in quest of their chimeric reproduction. As in ancient myths, science thus enfeebled will once more become the theater of phantasmagoric appearances of chimeras of all kinds. And that's a great way of preempting next episode, Prude. So if you wanted to...
yeah, I'm thinking about what kind of engendering of monsters have we created.
Yeah,
we certainly have.
Oh,
in our current body horror of today.
But it's funny because like I'll say this point more next week, but something so like lowbrow and chud culture-ish as deathmatch wrestling, you can almost see that in a lot of contemporary art. Like Marina Abramovic would like there was this one where she was protesting the Bosnian War, and of course she was on the side of the Bosnians, you know, because she would like she was in this theater in Milan, and she could hear, allegedly she heard the gunfire all the way across the Adriatic going on in Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. She danced half naked, and she had a wire brush cleaning decaying bones, like animal bones, that she kept trying to clean with this wire brush. And it was like this performance that went on for, I believe, 48 hours or something like that. She didn't eat or drink anything. She just danced around and cleaned the bones, and it was disgusting and filthy and smelly. And that was to protest the Bosnian War. Is that not like deathmatch wrestling in a weird way? You know, you're mutilating your own body. Then you have like STELARC, who Virilio talks about, where he's like suspending himself and putting chips in his skin and mutilating himself and flagellation and so forth. And it's like, man, that's really like, the stuff I used to download on LimeWire from Combat Zone Wrestling back in the day. What do you think he meant by like McLuhan being bucolic and sort of like? I guess he kind of was, because his vision of Canada was very much the agrarian, old school Canada that was like pre.
It's very funny because, you know, this bucolic protesteur of like of the global village. There's a lot in McLuhan that I feel like he's giving a very terrible read of Marshall, because I don't find Marshall's work bucolic, or that it's related. It's not rustic. It's not pastoral. The global village is taken by a lot of liberals to mean something different than what McLuhan says in his own words it's to be. And he's just like, no, like we're going to know we're going to live in this, but this also means we're going to come to know each other, and we're also going to come to hate each other. And the world as we know it is going to change. Like there's a very reactionary undertone when I read Understanding Media, because he himself is kind of recognizing that the Western world as we know it is orientalizing. It is becoming more Eastern. And thus, like the textual understanding of the Western world with text and language is fundamentally being eroded through these audio-visual understandings, these trance-like aspects of media. And so it's very funny to listen to Virilio call, and a lot of people do this too, like the guys who wrote the Californian ideology essay, they find McLuhan to be this like bucolic, pastoral, like what a nice kind of like, you know, but they view him very reactionary, and they view him as this like great harbinger of doom. And Virilio also looks at it this way, in the sense that like, again, that new left understanding of things is really showing forth here. But like while McLuhan's reactionary, he's not really happy about the global village either, because the through line I see in a lot of McLuhan's work when talking about like the interaction of new media versus the old is that the old ways of our understanding, especially you read this in the Gutenberg Galaxy, like all of a sudden, like the Western way and the way we think and the way that Marshall thought, or his like parents or grandparents thought, that's dying, it's disappearing, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
So it's particularly interesting to see how Virilio contrasts that here.
I think this came up with your interview with his grandson, but do you think like there was a reason, like there was first like sort of like a lib misreading of McLuhan with the global village, but do you think like his legacy was sort of buried up until recently? Because it seemed like throughout like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, McLuhan was forgotten, but then in the mid 90s, you had people like Terence McKenna that were talking about him, and now like in the internet age, McLuhan seems to have like gotten another renaissance. Was there like a reason for his influence being buried, or is it just because people forgot about him, or was it because they did see like some weird reactionary tendencies in him that wasn't as like flowery and positive towards the future? I don't know.
I don't know, because during this late mid 60s to early 70s, he was, I don't want to call him, his popularity I think was equal in a lot of ways to that of Jordan Peterson as a Canadian public intellectual. Unlike Peterson, McLuhan never lost his mind, and McLuhan never lost his faith in anything. And so like I think it has a lot to do with time, that, you know, after his repose from now until today, there had always been this focus on him. But I think that as the media environment changed, McLuhan just became this like safe staple that everyone was really supposed to know or supposed to read. You know, like there were books on how to understanding media and things like that, to a point where he was even made fun of in Woody Allen movies. But like, I think that there has been this like slow revival in our spaces, but also by others just in general, to really actually read his work, because everyone can say, oh, the medium is the message, but no one fucking knows what that means, you know, like unless you read him and you actually read his book, you're not going to know. And so I think that a lot of people trying to make sense of how our brains and our understanding of the world has been totally mind blown or one-shotted or whatever by technology, a lot of people are going back to media theorists and trying to understand things in the same way that like Chomsky's manufacturing consent is kind of seen a revival by leftists and normies alike.
Yeah, parapolitics people.
Yeah.
Finally, did you want to talk about the Peter Thiel interview or no?
We can do that next week. I've only seen clips. I've not watched the full Ross Douthat interview. Although I did watch a few others of Ross, and like I find Ross to be, he's not a bad interviewer.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
there are better interviewers. Like, it'd be cool if like Ben Boyce or Jay Burden got to interview some of these guys, but like for a pudgy New York Times kind of liberal Catholic, he's not a bad interviewer.
Yeah. But I think the framing of that, well, we'll talk about it next week when I'll watch the whole thing, Prude. Maybe we could also talk about it.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. But I think like the way he framed it was sort of like he's being like an old stuffy fuddy-duddy. And I think, Peter Thiel didn't exactly make like a bad point, but I think that I'm skeptical of all these Silicon Valley people determining the course of the future. Like we talked about Nick Land, debating Elon, which is funny because like Nick Land is very forgiving and charitable towards Elon Musk until recently. He was, but I think like even Nick Land realized like he sort of like saw how the sausage was made, where he's like, oh wow, this guy actually is a dumbass. Like, like, oh fuck, like this guy isn't like gonna bring about the tech singularity. This guy's gonna bring about like endless coal. Like it's just I think Nick Land really got to see how the sausage was made by actually interacting with Elon rather than viewing Elon, I think, which a lot of people did because Elon gave us somewhat a level of freedom and autonomy on Twitter. I think like Nick Land was sort of viewing Elon's project as more starry-eyed than he should have. And
I think a lot of people did.
Yeah. But Elon, what is this? You were saying like, I think, or I mean, you're going to talk about it tomorrow. So, but Elon is like trying to reheat libertarian.
Well, it's all about the big beautiful bill shit again.
Yeah.
So, more of I need to check on it. Like I don't follow Elon Musk on Twitter, so it's like I should probably go through his timeline and see what the hell's going on. But it certainly does seem like we're re-engaging in the same outrage over the bill, and I'm sure there's a lot of his personal politics that are going to get screwed over. But if there's one thing about Elon Musk that I've learned, and I think everyone's kind of recently learned, is that he has some fucking awful political instincts, and that if he wants to play this game, he's going to realize like you can have a lot of money, but if you don't know how to use that effectively, good luck.
I didn't realize that we were going up against the good old boys and Lucas, and
they go live on Tuesdays too.
Oh man, I feel bad now. But
well, we're on a different platform because I know good old boys is on Twitch.
Yeah, and then later on Patreon. But I'm trying to look at what Nick Land he was debating with Elon.
Well, while you do that, let's go to the super chats.
We'll go to the super chats. So MAGA without Elon is like capitalism without schizophrenia, but I guess that's an inside joke. Oh, see, a little bit of the old Nick Land is still there, just a little bit. Oh yeah, people wanted me to rant on Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I have nothing to say besides that I'm glad that Marner is gone. Marner has screwed over the Maple Leafs every chance he got. And all this business about, the fans were, they hated him and it was bad for his family. Well, okay. He should have thought of that when he turned off every playoffs. Maybe he would have scored a little bit more in the playoffs. He wouldn't be in this position. But also, Vegas is way more forgiving in terms of taxation than Toronto. That's for sure. So it's just, I don't know.
America in general is way more forgiving with taxes than Toronto.
Exactly. And so the fact that Marner left for the same price is sort of like, you know what I mean? Like, I just, was he the weakest link? Probably not, but it's like, there was too much bad blood there. There was too much bad blood, and I think he had to go. And I'm trying to find, like, where is he talking about? Where's Elon Musk? Maybe I should just go to Elon Musk.
Yeah, it'd be a good place to start. I mean, that's what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Oh, here it is. Or in LinkedIn. So, like, every member of... So, Elon says every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their heads in shame. And they will lose their primary next year as if the... Oh, you mean... Okay, Elon.
in a place with a 92% re-election rate. Okay.
Yes. Let me be real with you, Elon. And this is not just in America. This is in Canada. This is in the UK. This is in Germany. This is everywhere. Like literally everywhere. This is in sub-Saharan Africa. This is in fucking South Africa, Elon, where you come from. Voting for more Gibbs translates to winning re-elections. That's just the facts. You know what I mean? It's just let's be real. What do people vote for? People vote for their self-interests. And however their material self-interests, their cultural self-interests, their racial self-interest, their moral self-interest, people will always vote for Gibbs, no matter what. And the Democrats, they could say that, well, they're cutting welfare and so forth. But then Trump could just come around and say, no, actually, this is the biggest spending increase since Newt Gingrich's contract with America. Right? It's like Elon is like, his political instincts are literally the worst I've ever seen. There are die-in-the-wool irony leftists who have way better political instincts. There are people that I hate with every fiber of my being, but I will admit that they have way better political instincts as to how people actually respond than Elon Musk. It's just, it's like, I don't know what to say. It's insanity. It's insanity. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm trying to find where. Yeah, but go ahead.
I just said you're telling me, and you can hear more on my thoughts on this tomorrow on Oren's channel.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where he responds to Nick Land, but it's just to say that's insane. Like, even the boomers that like Fox News conservative boomers, like they even like will vote for Gibbs. Like America's not like like, oh my God, just as I was going to say it, he posts Elon Musk posts a clip of Milton Friedman. Like,
this isn't the first time he's done it.
Yeah, it's like America's not Milton Friedman America. It's like oh my God, like it's bad, but I'm trying to find where he replied to Nick Land, but maybe here it goes. Okay, so Nick Land says, it's like Inception. I keep thinking Elon's woken up, but then he plunges into a whole new and deeper level of delusion. And then I'm going to retweet that one. That's incredible. So then this is what Elon Musk responds with. Where is it? I can't believe it. You figure like it'd be the number one. So Elon Musk says number two. So Nick Land says number one, build Mars colonization technology, including lots of robots. Number two, support doging the shit out of USG. Number three, leave politics to people vastly over on the autism spectrum. Then Elon says number two is destroyed by this insane spending bill. What good is Doge saving 160 billion when the bill is increasing the debt ceiling by 5 trillion? It makes a mockery of the work. And how are we supposed to reach Mars if America goes de facto bankrupt? Elon, America with the world reserve currency, it doesn't matter. Debt does not, you could say this is like new monetary policy, but debt does not matter when you are the world reserve currency. It does matter to an extent. And, America, like every other empire, will have to face hard material reality eventually. But in the meantime, when it comes to those great projects of even getting to the moon to begin with, it didn't really matter. I believe there's still some debt from the moon landing, if I recall, some insane figure, right? It's just like, it's insane. It's insane. Then Nick Land says, debt ceiling is completely irrelevant metric. Concentrate on actual government spending. What should be cut and isn't being cut. Then Elon says, how are we supposed to do this? And so this is Nick Land's reply. Mars is your knitting. Stick to it. Lofty powers will sort out the contextual stuff. And it's just, it's really... I can't believe Elon was mad enough to actually reply to Nick Land. That was crazy. It's just... Well, you're going to talk about tomorrow on Aaron, so maybe we should...
Yeah, so let's just get to the super chats. I got a call later.
All right, so let's go to So this is time. SNEED those super chats. I prefer Entropy, but on YouTube as well. So on Entropy, we have Sam153 for $5. Is Connor McDavid staying with the Oilers? When's the Cole report going up on Substack? The Cole report will be going up on Substack tomorrow, and I'll have a teaser trailer. And I kind of think Connor McDavid's going to stay with the Oilers, but he was very, very pessimistic in his media statement. So it's kind of a fantasy that he's going to go back to Toronto. That's never going to happen. But unless they get rid of Austin Matthews and a bunch of other people. But I think maybe some people were floating the idea that when Sid the Kid retires in Pittsburgh, that maybe the Penguins would go for another generational talent to win another cup, which would be Connor McDavid. But I think that as the last 2 Stanley Cup playoffs have proven, comparing Sidney Crosby to Connor McDavid is kind of premature. I hate to say it, but Connor McDavid has to win at least 1 Stanley Cup to be compared to Sid the Kid. So by Sid the Kid, he's 38 years old. He's almost retirement age. So anyways, but thank you, Sim143. And Novum for $3. Cheers, gents. I think if Bob Dylan met Bob Dylan. Oh my God, is it a play on Bob Dylan?
Yeah, that's why I said that earlier. I said it's Bob Villain.
Oh my God. I think if Bob Villain met Bob Dylan, then Dylan's gaze would turn villain to stone, not because Dylan would want to, but because he's old. So that's a good comment. Thank you, Novum. And Sam153 for $15. Happy Dominion Day. SNEED to all the fellow BNAers, British North Americaners. Thank you, Sam153. I know Sam153 was a Leaf, but I have to scroll up now for the Super Chats. For some reason, it's still not highlighting on StreamYard. Maybe I have to...
Well, on YouTube, you can separate it by fan funding.
Yeah, I could do that. But if I wanted to highlight the Super Chats...
No, I get that, yeah.
Yeah, so let me go up. There was one Super Chat at the beginning that was very generous. So where is it? Here it is. So this is from Markkinen for 50 Canadian dollars. Canadians, while Anglo and French are the country they built, are nothing but a rich corpse to be exploited by vultures and bacteria without an animating identity. Carney gave lip service to a nation of Anglo, Quebecois, and French national is an absurd display. Yeah, I 100% agree, but thank you so much for that donation, Markkinen. That's a great point. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Pruder?
No, we covered that, and I do agree. It was lip service from the right just to be further left.
Yeah. And Markkinen again for $10. Carney's immediate caving on the digital service tax after Trump's canceling trade talks is a perfect example of the pathetic, incompetent leadership we have. Exactly. I had this idea I was actually floating to Black Horse. What if Trump, and the only way this could happen is if Sean Hannity on Fox News mentioned it. What if Trump said the only way he's going to start negotiating again on tariffs with Mark Carney is if Mark Carney tables and destroys the online harms bill? You know how Sargon wanted to meme Gamergate 2? This is me wanting to meme Gamergate 2. We need to meme to President Trump that the condition of tariff trade talks with Canada is if Mark Carney gets rid of the online harms bill. That is my Gamergate. It's never going to happen, but one could try.
One could most certainly try.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I know that JD Vance is friends with that Giovanni guy in the Conservative Party. So maybe, I don't know, maybe JD Vance can start. You could talk about it with Trump. Who knows? We need to get.
Well, they've definitely tried to make the freedom of speech question a more politically relevant one in this day and age. Yeah. So only time will tell.
Yeah,
but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, me neither. But thank you, Markkinen, for the incredibly generous donations. You are well loved by Digital Archipelago. And Dunk, the short-legged Mac Daddy, a Chino for $1.99. A happy white White History Month, Canada Day, Gio. Thank you for that one. Oh boy.
So true.
So true. Oh boy. So I'm going. So here, Big Ben for $10. Breaking Geo. What are you guys doing to me? What are you Geo confirmed? What was that in reply to?
I have no idea.
Was that because I said on the core report that I found Mondani's wife kind of attractive? Is that what it's reply to?
Ew.
I don't know. She's all right. She's all right. I don't know why guys had to go after. I know why. I know why. I'm just saying that.
You know, irony leftists on Twitter were like, "Oh, she's so hot," and I'm like,
"She's like Cleopatra."
No.
Did you see that post by our friend Isaac Simpson on the Mondani thing?
I did see the tweet.
It's incredible. I loved it. It was incredible. Like
it's very troubling for the right, and I'm like, okay, buddy.
Well, that one was a stupid one, but I mean the one he was like quote tweeting, not that one.
No, then I didn't see that one.
Maybe I should read it. I have it bookmarked, so I wanted to read it because I think, you know, it was a stupid tweet, the one he replied with, but this one actually is pretty accurate. So this is from yesterday. I have it in my core report book. Here we go. Mondani is Theater Kid 2.0 global elite theater kid, the diluted and expanded version of the 1.0 feminized Ivy League Brooklyn DSA rich kid, Democratic Socialists of America rich kid, that then they encountered in college, then immediately mirrored so as to socially climb. I have encountered several of these types, defined by rootlessness, friends giving, discussions of pop culture, Brat, Secession, the show with Dasha for one season, etc., highly curated and totally empty ethnic cultural signifiers and signaling abandoning of any actual religious belief as their religion is neoliberal globalism. A very scary zombie-like sort of person whose entire life is about projecting their appropriateness and lack of threat, except of the political issues which they are comfortable making veiled violent threats towards, nativists and other evil empire bad guys. One of these types once approached me and attempted to have a bro-like sports conversation about WNBA, a truly disgusting, oozing chungus type. And that was brilliant. That's a brilliant tweet right there. And yeah, I think that really encapsulated it, Prude.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah. Chungus, neoliberal, globalist, millennial. An eighth Templar for $10. If your auto-Carthaginianism leads you to ally with anti-white, you are... I can't say that. I can't say that on YouTube. But, you know, he can say it, but I can't. So, thank you, Lou Templar. That was a great one.
Appreciate the money.
You probably can say that word on YouTube, but I bet you can't. I don't know. I wouldn't want to test it.
Let's not.
Let's not. Okay. But I understand. Like, I can see both sides of it. That's the thing. I can see both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that one thing is more egregious because, like I said on the Cole report, I have no, to put it lightly, I have no love for the actions of the IDF of the past 2 years. But I think one thing is, to me personally, more egregious than others living in a Commonwealth country. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Yeah, I just think that. Anyways, I'm getting to the other ones. I'm scrolling. I can't believe that StreamYard. I gotta find out what's going on here. It won't display the starred ones, but yeah. So if not, I might have to go to. Oh, here we go. For $2, green Glassful, good friend. Blind due to medical issues. But sup, Big Gio? Oh my God, are you actually blind due to medical? I'm sorry, my friend. I'm sorry. That's yeah. You were in our prayers, Green Glassful. But thank you for the super chat, and all of us at Digital Archipelago pray for you and the healing of your sight. But thank you, my friend. Yeah. Man, that was I gotta admit that sucked the wind out of me right there a little bit. Anyways, and our Templar, a good friend, for $5. What if you award someone a grillion in debt versus what if you had a gun? U.S. financial theory in brief. That's a good one. That's a good
well, you
one.
have debt, and it's like, well, I have a gun.
Yeah.
It's bank robber politics right there. I like that.
And I think that was the last one. But thank you, A Templar, and thank you to all our beautiful. We have more on.
I was about to say to check your entropy.
We have more entropy. And our good friend Oswald Art, Owen Zaleski. Hi, gents, for $3. Hi, gents. My brother and I just turned 27. I hope you are both well. I'm working on getting more of my art out in the local scene down here in MD. Love the art shorts. Gio do art streams. Goodbye. God bless. Sorry, God bless. Thank you, Owen Zaleski. And
good. Best of luck to those endeavors.
Yeah. I kind of miss Seneca's Missouri lore updates.
I'm sure he's been busy. I haven't seen him super chat in a while.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's busy. And Charlie Mackey, your good friend, for $20, which I think in USD is almost close to $30 in Canadian. Good evening. I hope you're both are well. Man, I was in Europe for a couple of weeks, and you really feel the lack of Mayan corn demons. Mayan corn demons.
Yeah, traveling to America, traveling from present day America to Europe is it's the inverse Paris syndrome. You're like, wow, things are nice. There's no Mexicans here.
Oh man. You know, someone said, I remember reading when I was younger, I remember reading a ton of lore because it was one of my favorite films as a kid. Because of my old man, we watched it together. Apparently there was a theory that there was a chief Cornstalk in Virginia that was persecuted by the settlers, and that comes from the myth of the Mothman prophecies, and that actually the Mothman is an ancient corn demon. So I wonder.
Sure, why not? I don't know.
Why not? Yeah, I quite like that interpretation of Mothman.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah. Did you know that in Virginia they have a whole like Mothman convention?
Yeah,
every year.
It's got statues and everything.
Yeah. I wanted to go. I should go.
You should.
Yeah. But anyways, so unless there's more super chats, what are you doing, Prude? Like I say, tomorrow tomorrow
tomorrow I'm on Oran's, but yesterday Dimes and I finished our episode of Do You Even Read, covering Charles Norris Cochrane's Christianity and Classical Culture, from Augustus to Augustine. It was really good. I really enjoyed that book and the stuff I got to take away from it. Hope that you do as well. I'll have everything up on the podcasts this week as well, all the backlog, including everything up to yesterday. I'll be on Oran's tomorrow, and then for my lovely Subscribe Star supporters, you will get a very long rant on the question of nostalgia and Halo this week. I finally have it edited, so it'll be out this Thursday. And of course, there will be a trailer teaser hour for the regular viewers as well. So that'll be this month's Discourse Corner episode, and then after that, I've got I wanted this to be an unscripted rant, but then it turned into a scripted discussion about artificial intelligence and the question of delusion. So it'll be a real talk, but it'll be scripted, and that'll be out next week.
Did you check about the Mike Israel clip?
Yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh man, my recording sucks now because I got other shit I got to throw in here. So
my life's work, and you just said it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, more crap I have to go throw in here because this is too good not to use or talk about.
Oh man, I feel bad because Renaissance periodization actually is a great resource for. Not that I believe in pure scientific lifting, but yeah, like I said last week. Oh man. And as for me, tomorrow I will release the Cole Report episode 12 with our good friend A Templar. I just have to create a sizable teaser trailer And by the end of the week, I want to get another content minded out, maybe an interview. Although I do have to start pumping out. I have about 3 episodes of bringing various people on to talk about the book House of Leaves. And I believe I'm going to be recording with Jay Burden on House of Leaves this week. So I will have, I'm going to have Jay Burden, our good friend Cap, and Orc Brand. And I wanted to get an e-girl who has read the book to talk about it. But
e-girls don't read.
Yeah, I know people. Well, I mean, they claim to read. They claim to read. You know, they read Joan Didion or Anais Nin. Man, I'm probably never going to be able to release that review of the Bell Jar.
You don't know that.
Well, I mean, hopefully the heat's died down with the person I was interviewing, the girl I was interviewing with.
That might, yeah, it'll probably do the trick. Yeah,
so, well, she's being stalked by this deranged British academic. So, yeah. What are you gonna do? I had to pick only an e-girl that went to a mental institution could do a proper justice to the Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. So
only the psychopaths.
Oh boy.
I have no idea who you're talking about. I just think mentally unwell e-girl, and I'm like, yep, that's I'm good. That's Gio territory.
She's a very nice person.
I believe you.
You know, she's very brilliant. She's actually pretty brilliant. She's very brilliant actually, but you know, I mean, she's got her own personal problems.
You don't say.
She posted Tummy from the psych ward. No, it's not RFH. It's not RFH. She posted, oh my God, Milk Truck Driver. Oh my God. I saw that Milk Truck Driver was actually piling on her a few weeks ago. So it's just,
I think Milk Truck Driver getting a Milk Truck Driver fan account has really gotten to his brain.
Oh, he's got a Milk Truck Driver fan account?
Yeah, there's a Milk Truck Driver fan.
Did he do it himself? Or is it
I don't think it's him. Unless MTD is that deranged. But even then.
He's not that deranged.
I don't think he's that crazy.
Yeah. I have a few fan accounts. I think you have one.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to think.
Do you really
if I do, I don't want to think about it.
It's one of those things where it's best not to think about it.
Best not to acknowledge.
It's sort of like what Frank Grimes said on The Simpsons, where he goes to Homer. He goes to Lenny and Carl. He goes, that guy is your safety inspector, and then Carl goes, it's best not to think about it.
Yeah, I don't think about it.
Yeah, refill popcorn. You love my next account. Oh, you know what else I did, Prude? I don't know if I'm gonna make.
Are there any other super chats, Gio? I don't mean to be an asshole. I just got things to do.
I was gonna talk about how I rewatched That Feel with No GF. But anyways, thank you all. I will have the core report out tomorrow, and I will have a content mine out. Prude will have his discourse corner out, and I'm pretty sure he'll probably gonna write something soon too.
Oh yeah, it'll be an essay and a video at the same time.
Nice. So as we always say, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. We'll be on Prude's channel. We'll finish up the book, and I'm sure there's always news stories to talk about. But thank you so much. It's been a great one. We've had a lot of Gemerald theory selling. God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet.
See you, gents.